All right. I'm calling this meeting to order the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education for August 11th, 2022. Superintendent, can you please take roll?
Member Villa,
Here.
Member Pritchett,
Here.
Member Garcia,
Here.
Member Wu.
All right, we have a quorum. Do we have any public comment?
There is none.
All right, we will move to closed session. All right, we apologize for the delay. And we know that you've all been waiting here, so we're going to get going. Calling this meeting back to order of the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education. Superintendent, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, please stand. Oh, okay. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
All right, just a few things. You probably see a new face up here tonight. I'd like to introduce to you Liam McGurk. She's currently a junior at Hiram Johnson High School. Liam identifies as a Native American and Filipino and is a member of the, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Acomo Pablo tribe. I knew she would correct me. And uses a he, him pronouns. Liam is currently the treasurer of the Native Youth of SAC, a Native Youth Leadership Group of SUSD. Liam was a former member of the American Indian Summer Institute, which was a Native American summer program that helps students get ready for college. Liam has co-developed a swim club at Hiram Johnson High School, which teaches water safety and survival to students. Most recently, Liam has been a Summer Matters student ambassador and a member of the SAGA, which is the Sexually and Gay Allies Club that helps find communities and self-expression. Sorry, my glasses are fogging up. Liam also volunteers at the library, helping and planning activities in teen space. In his free time, Liam likes to swim, read, and hang out with friends. He plans to further his education at American River College and get an AA to become a physical therapist to pursue a 4-year university in the future. Can we please give a warm welcome? Welcome. All right, and before I ask Liam for your statement, I just want to start tonight. We've over the summer, this has been a very hard summer in my community in Rosemont that I represent. And it's with deep sorrow that I open tonight's meeting. Sorry, try to take off my mask because my glasses are really fogging up now. Tonight's meeting, I want to honor Dr. Irene Easter, who passed away last month after a courageous battle with ALS. Dr. Easter was an educator in Sac City Unified for the district for 33 years. Dr. Easter had really deep roots in her community and her school with her babies. That's what she called those children at her school, her babies. She attended Sac State University, where she earned her bachelor's degree in teaching credential and a master's degree in educational administration. She later earned a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Laverne. Dr. Easter began her career at Sutterville Elementary, where she taught for 9 years before becoming a reading coach, student achievement specialist, and coordinator of professional development. In 2004, Dr. Easter became the principal of Golden Empire Elementary, where she served as the site leader for 18 years. Through her career, Dr. Easter touched the lives of countless students, her babies, and the families all throughout our community, including mine. I was fortunate to call Dr. Easter a friend as well as a colleague. She will be remembered for her passion in her education and her support for the commitment to students, her babies, and their families, and her colleagues all across the district. While she is deeply missed by many, Dr. Easter's legacy will live on in the lives of many students as she taught and supported through her career at Sac City Unified. Thank you. Give me a second. All right. All right, item 4.2, broadcast statement. Would you like to bring your first broadcast statement? This meeting. Oh, here you go.
This meeting of the Sacramento City Schools Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communication, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air Monday, August 15th at noon and Wednesday, August 17th at 6 p.m. This will also be webcast at metrolive.com, sacountry.net, and can be reviewed on Metro Cable 14 YouTube channel. We welcome members of the audience to address the board. Please complete a speaker form located in the back of the community room and give them to our communication representatives along with any handout you may have for the board prior to the conclusion of the item presentation. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is not on the agenda, we will ask you to please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda. Please also turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate.
Fantastic. Good job. Okay. Thank you. All right, item 4.3, recognition of McClaskey Adult Program.
Thank you very much, President Pritchett. At this time, I'd like to just ask our special guest, along with Dr. Gilmore, to come up to the podium.
All right. Over the summer, one of our school sites was victimized by a despicable act of theft that deeply affected those who come to depend on us most. On the weekend of July 16th, a van and trailer were stolen from the A. Warren McClaskey Adult Center. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the McClaskey Center, our staff there will work to create opportunities for adults with developmental disabilities by increasing and broadening their sense of independent fulfillment. The van and trailer were used by those adult students to collect recyclables items from schools, businesses, and government buildings. The recyclables are then sorted back at the McClaskey Adult Center so that they can be turned into a recycling center for money. Fortunately, the van was recovered by the California Highway Patrol, but the trailer was never found. Without the trailer, the recycling program's impact and involvement is vastly reduced. However, there is good news at the end of this story. The theft at the McClaskey Center was covered by KCRA, and the story was seen by Dan Hickman and Shannon Williams, the husband and wife owners of Hickman Utility. Dan and Shannon have incredible hearts and had contacted Dr. Susan Gilmore at the McClaskey Adult Center to donate a brand new trailer from the Western Featherlight Trailers. We are profoundly, thank you and thank you both for your generosity to get this invaluable program running without a hitch. So thank you so much. Would you like to say a few words?
Dr.
Would you
Gilmore,
like to say a few words?
please. It turned on. The mic. Dr. Gilmore, the mic there, you press.
Push the button. There you go.
Gotcha. I would say maybe 10 minutes after that news story aired, I got an email because they were creative enough to be able to Google and find out an email for me and offered to donate the trailer. I will say that it restored my faith in people. The students were so excited. They didn't get to see it because we had to go to Sheridan to pick it up. And it's being stored now at our transportation yard. And the students, we took over to see it on Monday. And talk about excited. I mean, they were just flabbergasted. And it did a lot for their spirits. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your kindness. All right, item 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session. Sorry,
Good evening, President Pritchett. Superintendent will be making the announcements this evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collins. And again, thank you so much to Dan and Shannon for your generosity as you exit the room. Thank you again. I'm very pleased to announce this evening several appointments that were approved by our board in closed session. I will start with the first by a vote of 4-0 with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent. The board approved the appointment of Mr. Jesse Castillo as Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Congratulations, Mr. Castillo. Also by a vote of 4-0 with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent, the board approved the appointment of Miss Africa Full-Love as principal of John Sloat Elementary. Congratulations. By a vote of 4-0 with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent, the board also approved the appointment of Mr. René Sanchez as principal of Nicholas Elementary. Congratulations. Also by a vote of 4-0, with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent, the board approved the appointment of Ms. Tiffany Weldon as principal of Oak Ridge Elementary. Congratulations. By a vote of 4-0, with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent, the board also approved the appointment of Ms. Michelle Lamrossi as principal of Pony Express Elementary. Congratulations. And finally, by a vote of 4-0 with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent, the board approved the appointment of Ms. Heather Bennett as principal of Tahoe Elementary, and she joins us this evening. Congratulations, Ms. Bennett.
Thank you, Superintendent, and congratulations. All right. Item 6.0, agenda adoption. Can I get a motion? All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. All right. Item 7.0, public comment. Do we have Brian? Who's reading?
We have 6 speakers signed up.
I didn't see that. Sorry, I was looking over there. All right.
Let's begin with April Ibarra and Maria Garcia. They'll come up together. Ms. Garcia has requested a translator. They'll be followed by Steve Bruno and Chohan Marpreet.
Welcome. Oh, you probably need to turn it back on. Sorry. There you go.
Alrighty. Good evening, board members and superintendent. My public comment today is on the subject of community schools. Okay, so I've learned that you in May received a second grant approval of this time 9.5 million for community schools. This year, my daughters are at Hiram Johnson High School, where it is listed as one of the schools to receive funding. One of them leaving Wilsey Wood, where she previously was. So my concern is, how are decisions being made? How is the community being engaged? How are parents and youth being engaged in the decision-making of what they want in their communities? I've spent the last 2 weeks talking to parents, mostly from the Hiram Johnson school area, and I still hear the concern for making the school feel safe and secure. So the subject of security, right? And that looks different for each parent. So like, how are you having those conversations with those families? I really want to know what is the collaborative plan around this? Something that has been sustainable since 1998, as we all know, is the parent-teacher home visits project that started here in this district. It was a collaborative effort. It worked with its labor partner, SETA, with community organizers, and with the school district, and it's been thriving, and it's a national model. I often hear you guys talk about how you want to be a destination district. An example for California, right? How can we be that example as the capital city? Well, why don't we start with making this a collaborative effort, and in hopes that it'll be yet another thing that we can show the rest of California is doable. But how are we going to do that if we're not included? Our kids aren't included, our community isn't included, the union isn't included. You've had proposals that have been sent to you guys, and it, you know, when is change going to happen?
Buenas noches. Yo lo que estoy preocupada es por la seguridad de la escuela. Mi hijo va en la Hiram Johnson. Yo voy, lo dejo y hay muchos niños que se salen luego.
Good evening, everyone. So what I'm worried, it's about the security of the school, Hiram Johnson. My kid goes to that school.
Sí, yo lo que veo que hay muchos niños que se salen. No hay seguridad para los niños que entran. Y sin embargo, yo he hablado a la escuela varias veces de que hay niños que se han salido, se van muchas veces al parque de la Target.
What I'm worried is that a lot of kids doesn't have that security. They just, leave the school. I have seen that happen many times.
Entonces, a mí lo que me dicen que no tienen presupuesto para pagar a seguridad. Entonces, ¿cuál es la seguridad que nos brinda la escuela a nosotros como padres? Saber que nuestros hijos van a estar seguros si no tienen una seguridad.
I try to contact multiple times, and also I'm just like you guys keep saying that there's no budget for have security at that school. So I'm just worried about the security of the students at that school.
Ha habido ocasiones que por casualidad yo llego a pasar ahí cuando llego a tener citas y he visto policías, bomberos, ambulancias, ha habido problemas y nunca nos han avisado. Yo tengo que ir para saber qué respuesta me dan referente a la seguridad que mi hijo está en la escuela.
Multiple times that I pass by, or that just being at the school, I see police, ambulance, and in order to note these, I have to go and ask to the school, but the school doesn't let us know what happened, so I'm very worried about the security of the students.
Esa es la única razón de lo que me preocupa. No nomás es este año que tengo a un niño ahí. Mis otros 2 hijos se han graduado de esa escuela. Y hay muchas cosas que han cambiado. En vez de que cambien para mejor, están cambiando para peor. Entonces, a mí, esa es mi preocupación por mi hijo.
I haven't seen a lot of change happening. It's not the only student that I have at the school. I have my older kids that I have been attending to the school, and instead of things getting better, I feel that it has been getting worse. That's it. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Next speaker's Nikki Malevsky, and, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Still have another one coming
Yes.
up. Sorry. And then Ms. Molesky after that.
Hang on a second. There we go. Steve Bruno and Harpreet Chauhan. That's followed by Nikki Malevsky, who has yielded her time to David Fisher.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Steve Bruno. I'm one of the unrepresented employees of this district, and I want to start by thanking you all for the compensation package you approved at the last meeting. I remember when we didn't receive any health care coverage at all, so it's a very generous package that I really appreciate. However, at the meeting, it was stated that the measure was to bring us in alignment with the other bargaining groups. And while it does that with our health insurance, our vision and dental coverage are still different from almost every other bargaining group in the district. But what you approved didn't address that. So myself and several of my coworkers found it to be a little confusing what your intention was. So what I'm requesting is that you add it to a future agenda, because I understand you can't discuss it tonight, to make clear what your intention was either way. So just so that we can all understand whether you intended to bring us into alignment on those or not. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right. Good evening, board members and superintendent. My name is Harpreet Chauhan. I am the principal at Aspire Capitol Heights Academy. I want to go ahead and start off by saying thank you for your partnership with our school for the past, it's almost 20 years. If you recall, about 2 years ago, our community was standing in front of you requesting your support or your approval of our material revision. Our campus at that time was old, and it was just not a suitable environment for our scholars, teammates to thrive. And so with pride, hope, and a ton of gratitude, I am happy to announce that we launched our 2022-23 year just this past week in our new campus on 7300 Folsom Boulevard. And it is beautiful, and there is magic happening in every classroom. And I'm just here to say a big thank you. We could not have done it without your commitment to Capitol Heights, to our young people. So we really, really appreciate everything you've done. I have some pictures. I know I'm biased, but I'm telling you, our kids are the best ever. So you got to see their faces and their smiles. I promise you, you'll fall in love. And we invite you to come and visit, please. You have created magic at our campus, and we really want to be able to show you everything you have done. We're also going to invite you all to our grand opening October 12th at 4 p.m. We'll send out invites. Please come and see everything you have done for us. And I'll leave, I don't know where to leave this. Hopefully
You can
guys
bring them
see
up here.
Oh, perfect. I can bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll share them. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Fisher. Four minutes.
Good evening. David Fisher, President of the Sacramento City Teacher Association. Hope everyone is having a continued restful summer as we head into the middle of August, and teachers are out there getting ready for school, and I know that there's a lot of excitement. At the same time, we had hoped, quite frankly, that a lot of the chaos and lack of cooperation that led to our strike last spring would recede as the school year concluded and we embarked upon a new school year. Unfortunately, that does not appear to be the case. Despite funding that, as one school board member expressed to us just last week, shows Sac City, quote, strong funding and solid finances, end quote, Superintendent Aguilar has refused to implement many aspects of the MOUs we reached to try to mitigate the staffing crisis. Moreover, the superintendent, and by the extension, the school board, has refused to extend the MOUs into the new school year, even as we are facing a continued or another staffing crisis. where there are currently at least 100 certificated vacancies. The district's refusal to extend the agreements, including the pay increases for substitutes, means that students will very likely face the same massive teaching shortage that plagued the district last year and led to the strike. It's important to note that the staffing crisis in the district is not limited to staff represented by SCTA. If you're not aware, the exit of top administrators since Mr. Aguilar has been superintendent has been staggering. 2 chief business officers, 2 chief academic officers, 2 chief communication officers, 1 chief information officer, 1 chief operations officer, 1 in-house counsel, the chief continuous and improvement officer, multiple area instructional superintendents, a director of special education, a director of labor relations, an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, a director of social and emotional learning, an assistant superintendent for facilities. Additionally, this does not even include the massive turnover among principals and, of course, teachers. Considering the enormous investment in public schools from both the state and federal governments, the district is clearly not using those funds to make sure that every student has a teacher in the classroom. The budget you'll discuss this evening has staggering surpluses, again, of over $181 million. A recent article on EdSource identified several new areas the district will need to address in 22-23. Changing the COVID protocols, universal TK, community schools, just to name a few. At the same time, we'll continue to face staffing shortages. We're very concerned the district has done very little to engage with us on these important topics, and as the school year is about to start. Now, the superintendent loves to quote efficiency expert W. Edwards Deming, quote, "Every system is perfectly designed to get the result that it does," end quote. Sac-City's system, apparently with your support, has been apparently perfectly designed to create chaos and conflict and leave 3,000 students a day without even a substitute teacher. It's been perfectly designed to lead 95% of all Sac-City employees to vote by a margin of 97% that they have no confidence in the superintendent. It's been perfectly designed to generate mass exodus of top administrators and principals, many who have been spent decades in the district. The system apparently has been perfectly designed to be broken. However, here we are, another school year with massive increases in ongoing funding and another opportunity to change direction. Who among you has the courage to lead the effort to change it? Thank you.
Next speaker.
Rich Vasquez for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Vasquez.
Good evening. Just sitting at home and then just saw my principal is going to be up here, so I just want to hold everyone accountable when they come up here and give these presentations. Is it going back to the school site? How are we implementing at the school site? Again, been to all these school site councils, LCAP, this and that, and I'm telling you, I'm at the school site. I don't see this stuff implemented. I don't see the data. I don't see anything. How do you show us that you're implementing it, and how is it being successful again? Hiram Johnson, we got the worst data. Spanish teachers, we got a vacancy right now. There was a vacancy when I went there when we started 4 years ago for my daughter. Math teacher, I know there was vacancies up there a couple of weeks ago. I said we're hiring late. We suck. You're talking about equity when I always your kids don't go to the schools that we go to, so there is no equity because you don't know where you're living, and you're not even fixing the problems, same problems 4 years ago. Just want to let you know you suck. Ain't nothing changing. I mean, right? And I'm about to be out. I'm just like, please don't let my daughter have a vacancy this year at least, right? How am I telling her education's everything and we're going to school and just dumb stuff happening? And even all the stuff, that goes on at Hiram Johnson, right? All the stuff that we're not speaking publicly, different things like that. Yeah, no one's sending their school kid there. Even when I think about, again, I had a kid at West Campus, and I don't even like that because it split my family up. I'd rather have us over here, and she would have been a top star student at Hiram Johnson. Instead, she was almost the last rank in the class at West Campus because we ain't fitting in over there. And we're all trying to get over there like it's something. No, you guys want to get over there. Your kids want to get over there because that's your class of people, huh? Yeah, that's what I lived as a parent, trying to go over that school too. Like there's class of I can't fit in with those parents that are at the tables and stuff. And now I'm at Hiram Johnson and there's no one at the table but me. It's crazy. But again, I'm glad I'm almost out. Just want to let you know we suck. There ain't nothing improving. Hiram Johnson just had a school improvement grant. What improved? What is improved? I keep living it, keep going. Is something going to change? And again, I appreciate all the admin. A lot of people at Hiram Johnson, they're trying their best, but we're at the bottom of the system. You guys are at the top trying to make decisions, and, well, it ain't working at the bottom because we're living it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional public comment? Okay. All right, item 8.0, special presentations. 8.1, health and safety update. Mrs. Flores. Good evening.
All right. Good evening, Board President Pritchett, Superintendent, members of the board, and welcome to our newest board member. So excited to be here with you tonight. I'm Victoria Flores. I serve as your Executive Director of Student Support and Health Services, and I am here tonight with a COVID-19 update for the 22-23 school year. And so we always ground ourselves in what's happening locally in our county this year. And so this is a reflection of the CDC community levels. Really happy to be in front of you tonight to share that we are back into the medium zone, which is really good news. That level updated today. And so as you can see, when we last updated this on August 4th, we were down to, I think, 185, 88 maybe case count. Today we're down to 176. And as you see on the bottom there with our hospital admissions, they're kind of bouncing and staying around the same, but we remember that that's one of those lagging indicators. So we are heartened to see some of those case rates come down. I also wanted to provide some updates for what's happening in the world of COVID. You're probably hearing a lot about different variants. And last time I was with you in June, we were really talking about the BA4 and BA5 variant. So if you look at this picture on the right, this is a screenshot from the CDC's Nowcast. It's their variant tracker. And that yellow highlight is where we were at in June when we were back with you talking about the impacts of BA5. And what I really wanted to show and visualize for our community and the board tonight is how quickly that really does overtake. So each variant that's coming is kind of coming faster and impacting pretty quickly. But we know these tried and true layered mitigation measures really do work, and so we will stay grounded in those. We also shared that we have vaccine approval for 6 months to 5 years. We also now have full authorization for 12 plus for the Pfizer vaccine, so that's some exciting news. And a new vaccine booster that's pending on the horizon here. We're hearing a lot about it in the media, a bivalent COVID vaccine that's designed to really deal with some of these more transmissible variants, BA4 and BA5. So very hopeful, but we'll also manage our expectations. So again, just also want to give a plug to Test to Treat. There's some great antiviral treatments out there. We really encourage our community to reach out to their health provider. If you've tested positive for COVID and you're 12 or over and at risk of developing severe disease, really helps minimize symptoms and severity and hospitalizations. And we also had some updates this summer from our federal guidance as well as our state guidance. So CDC operational guidance actually just updated today, so really glad we were able to get this on the slide for you. Again, just grounding and why we're doing what we're doing here with COVID, with masking tonight, is all about providing safe in-person learning. We're rolling these into the way we do school as part of our normal operations, and they do reinforce that those COVID prevention-specific strategies should be tied to the level that we're experiencing in our county. Some updates for CDC is they are no longer advising that routine surveillance testing, that asymptomatic routine surveillance testing is no longer advised. They also are shifting away from quarantine and that test to stay and physical distancing. I'm really proud to say CDPH here in California, we had already made those shifts last year. The CDC also came out last time I was with you. I talked about that provisional testing framework, and they have now, solidified their guidance for testing for next school year. So really excited to share that at-home test kits or over-the-counter test kits are going to be much more widely available. We had talked about that last time, that ability to put this back on with our families or our staff. So they're going to be available for that re-entry, and I'll share a little bit more about that, symptomatic or exposure testing. Those are really what we're going to ground in. That asymptomatic surveillance screening is only recommended now for high-risk groups or activities, particularly during surges, outbreaks, or high transmission. So really kind of pulling that layer back as we lean into that at-home testing. I did also share that their staffing support was going to be greatly limited for this next year, and we, at this time, are not available for that additional staffing support. And what CDPH really shared in this guidance is they expect that with the increased availability and ease of that over-the-counter testing, it's really going to meet more of our needs, right? We have it so readily available now. It's available for free through our healthcare providers if we have insurance, through government order, and now through us, through schools. We're able to order that and get that out to our families. They also released their updated K-12 guidance. Not a lot of surprises here except for that shift with the testing. But I did want to ground us that, again, that purpose is safe in-person learning for student well-being and development. We know the impact of staying home, and so we really want to do everything we can. They also, of course, hearken us to this is what we currently know, what the current trends are, and things could change. So again, we're gonna keep to that pivoting. They updated their Swiss cheese charts here. So vaccines, masking, ventilation, outdoors is best. We're so lucky to live in California and be able to do a lot outdoors. Testing and really focusing again on testing symptomatic or those who are exposed. Of course, if we're positive for COVID, we need to stay home, and then again, that treatment. Just also want to call out the misinformation mouse, if you see that on this screen, just sort of nibbling away at little bits of cheese. And so really just wanting to make sure we give, factual information to our communities and our families. So this brings us to our vaccine and testing update as we look at our shifts this year. So we are aligning our vaccine mandate for students with that state timeline. Right now, it's projected to be the 23-24 school year. And then continuing COVID testing is indicated by that current guidance from CDC or CDPH and as our resources allow. So we will be doing that weekly vaccine clinic. It's actually shifted from your boardroom over to next door in room 4 every Tuesday night from 4 to 6 p.m. open to our whole entire community. You do not have to be, a part of Sac City. Anyone can come. First dose, second dose, booster, 5 and older. If and when we get that new vaccine, we'll hopefully bring that over as well. And then our testing strategies are aligning with that new guidance. So leaning into that at-home testing, getting those out to our community. We will maintain our symptomatic or exposure testing through our care rooms at every single one of our school sites. Our regional testing centers will remain open in those 3 different areas with both AM and PM hours. And then just a reminder, our CDPH staffing support did end. So this is our pivot to symptomatic exposure and reentry testing. And those testing for high-risk activities, I'm going to walk you through later in the presentation specifically what that will look like. Also just want to call out that the public health order for education workers does remain in effect for staff. So staff must either be fully vaccinated or undergo that at least weekly testing. So this remains for staff, and students were making this little bit of a shift. As we come to looking at our face masking guidance, I wanted to provide this visual representation of how our community levels have shifted. If you'll recall, that's part of our face masking guidance is tied to those community levels. And just want to say, this is what it's been for now, right? We can look back at these trends and kind of be hopeful that this is what we'll expect in the future, while remaining humble that COVID might throw us some curves, right? So you can see back at the end of February, when we started to come off of that Omicron surge, we hit that medium level and pretty quickly went into the low, right? And we stayed there for quite some time. That's when the board, decided to wait that 4 weeks. We lifted from requiring masking to recommending masking, and we had about 6 weeks where we were able to enjoy that until we had another surge. You can see the medium level was pretty quick, right? We moved pretty quickly back down into that, or up into that high level, and we sat there for 9 weeks. So we really are looking at these chunks of time when these waves come, and we kind of sit in these levels. We're now back down to medium, and we stayed medium today, and those numbers do look like they're going to continue to trend down. We don't know what the future holds, but just wanted to provide that overview. So for our face masking recommendation, we shared this back in June. When we are in the low and medium levels, face masking would be strongly recommended indoors. We are currently in the medium level right now. When we shift to that high level and we're back on that trajectory of widespread COVID, we want to do everything we can to protect in-person learning. That's why we'll put that additional layer on, and face masking would be required indoors. We did leave this, little caveat that at SUSD discretion, during a forecast of fluctuating weekly levels, maybe, we don't know what's coming, something might go back up or back down, that we would have some discretion there so that we prevented confusion or disruptions from masking on, masking off, and just because we don't know what's coming. When we look back, we do see that those trends do tend to hold. We don't predict that we will need that, but wanted to give us a little bit of that flexibility. Moving between required or recommended one way or the other would occur the following Monday after the CDC community level updates on Thursday, usually updates about 2 to 4 p.m. Our current policy right now, and why we're all face masking tonight, is to wait at least 2 weeks after those CDC levels are updated. So we're really recommending that we make that quicker pivot. We don't necessarily wait. We want to be able to enjoy those lows and the lower risk time, but when it is time to go back to masking, that we do that as well. Of course, just a caveat that a state or county public health order would supersede this policy. So as we look to wrapping up, we wanted to give you an idea of what COVID mitigation will look like throughout our district, our school, and our workspaces. Still focused on equity and making sure that we remove barriers to access to care, services, and supports. This is why we felt so passionately about having school-based testing that was very easy for our families and students and staff to access. Continue to monitor those metrics, whether they're CDC metrics or our own local COVID dashboard, really to help our communities make that personal risk assessment and determine what they want to do for their own health. Our health aides will be staffed out at all of our school sites to provide testing and to help our sites with any other, health-related needs. We know immunization rates for school-required immunizations have really fallen, and so really just trying to get back to some of those other preventative health measures. I've shared, what our testing will look like. We'll have testing at schools, our regional centers, focused on symptomatic exposure and getting those at-home test kits out, and our regional centers will remain open. We're still contact tracing for individual cases, and really focusing on those mitigation measures after an exposure. Masking would be targeted and risk-based, dependent on those levels, and we will maintain that stock of high-quality masks. Our vaccine clinics will remain open, and we're also starting our school-required vaccine clinic on August 22nd for our families to be able to be all up to date. And then, of course, our filtration, enhanced measures will remain. And we maintain readiness for the unknown and that level of humility. Lastly, before I wrap up, I really did just want to ground you in what is testing going to look like next year. So our care rooms are open during the school day at all schools. So you can drop in if you're symptomatic during the day or you learn of an exposure or you just want to test. It's right there. They will also help get those at-home COVID test kits out to our community. Weekly testing will continue to be provided to our departments located outside of CERNA. We have a regional testing center right next door if you're here at CERNA, but we had times and dates where we would provide that out at our other facilities. We're going to have a weekly testing day provided at our large schools or secondary schools for those high-risk activities that CDC and CDPH talk about, or high-risk populations. The reason for this is that it'll be more than our care rooms can handle because there's such a large population, so we'll have that additional day and time for them. And these are activities like band or orchestra or choir, where we're exhaling, or athletics with a lot of close contact, or maybe specific student populations who have high risk of vulnerabilities. We also have our 3 regional testing centers, as well as a routine distribution of our at-home COVID test kits for everyone. all staff, all students. So this is an example that next week we will be having at-home test kits going out to all of our sites and departments so that they can distribute those before school starts. So we can do that pre-entry testing. Those can go out during an orientation or a schedule pickup. We also have enough going out to our sites for the 3-day Labor Day weekend, as well as stocking in the care room. So if someone does test positive at school, we can send them home with an at-home test kit. They can take that test on day 5 and hopefully return with us. So we hope that that gives you, a good rounding of what that's going to look like next year. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor conditions. We're going to review any new guidance that comes along, implement that Swiss cheese model, and continue to provide ongoing training. We spent time with our principals today, a team of us also going through these COVID protocols. And with that, I'll wrap up.
All right, do we have any public comment?
We do. We have 8 speakers signed up. We have 6 total for Jean Shanley. 5 people have donated their time to Jean Shanley, so she has a total of 12 minutes.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I listened to Victoria's presentation, so I have a few comments on things that she mentioned that I've just observed along with you. And then I also have a document that I prepared as I was just going through the data on the SCUSD website. I don't know if you guys have this yet. I gave a stack of them over there. Okay, great. And so I have a few comments on that too, and questions. That's really like a conversation starter. So just a couple things I wanted to clarify on Victoria's presentation. On slide 3, she was talking about COVID updates, variants, and under vaccine. The second bullet point, full authorization of the Pfizer Comirnaty product. I just wanted to clarify, there's a little misinformation mouse here, that product is fully approved and available to students. It is not. The Comirnaty product that was approved is not available for sale in the United States. So there is no student who will receive that vaccine or has received it in the district. And when the district delivers vaccines to students, they should not represent that it's an FDA-approved product, because the actual product that you're delivering is not approved by the FDA. The reason for that bait and switch is because the Comirnaty product, once it's approved, gets liability responsibility by the manufacturers. And so that's why that product's not available, because the manufacturers don't want to be responsible for those products. The reason they continue to give the EUA product is so they can avoid liability. And the reason they tell everybody it's approved is because they think that will bolster people's confidence in it. But people should not have confidence in a product if the company doesn't have enough confidence in it to stand by it and cover lawsuits. So that product is not approved, and you shouldn't represent to anyone that when you're giving those vaccines, that's an approved product. The bivalent, this third bullet point, the bivalent COVID-19 vaccine boosters pending approval. Victoria was indicating that, that's a welcome arrival because it's going to really help protect everybody. As she also mentioned, though, those vaccine boosters are specifically tailored to the variants that are already passing through in the waves, and those waves will be gone by fall. That problem was specifically discussed by the Vaccine Advisory Committee to the FDA in their spring meeting, and I think I talked to you about it in one of the spring meetings. They specifically said that's a problem with these new vaccines, is by the time they roll them out, the variants that they're tailored to are already passed and gone through the population. So it's kind of a similar problem to the flu vaccines. On subsequent slides 7 and 9, there's references to hospitalizations. An ongoing issue with these hospitalizations, from what I can tell on the county website, is they don't distinguish which hospitalizations are due to COVID, because of COVID, and which hospitalizations are patients who arrived with COVID, but they're not really there for COVID. In other words, someone goes to the hospital for, a gallbladder issue. They have to be tested and screened on their way in the door. They happen to test positive for COVID. Nobody knows why. They don't have symptoms. They're not there for COVID. That gets logged as a COVID hospitalization. And this problem was flagged back in January. And from what I can tell, Sacramento County is not accounting for this. So I think all this hospitalization data is likely inflated. It'd be good if we could work with the county to get that data more specifically targeted to COVID so we can understand what's going on, because it's not really reliable. I also want to just touch on this Swiss cheese model. It's interesting that they, add the misinformation mouse, because that is a problem. Misinformation all over the place, a lot of things that need clarification, and the devil is always in the details. But this general concept of this Swiss cheese model is really outdated. It was sort of it came from Australia right at the beginning of the pandemic, like before there was any data on anything. There was no testing, there was no vaccines. And this was really just like a conceptual notion that this is how we protect, but it was not based on any data. So I wanted to clarify that. This whole Swiss cheese model and the concept is really outdated. For example, with regard to the shots, they're showing right now that the more shots you get, the more you exhaust the immune system. The experts call it immune imprinting. I call it just, immune system exhaustion, because that's more lay people terminology that's easy for me and a lot of people to understand. But this is not a new concept. This has been identified in science with flu vaccines, other vaccines in the past, I think MMR. It's just not something that's highlighted. None of this is really addressed. We're seeing the data come out now that there is immune imprinting. So if you're going to continue with these vaccine clinics and pushing people, keep vaccinating, all you're going to do is exhaust their immune systems. So that's something for to be evaluated. The masks, I'm not going to get into that too much today because there's just not enough time. That's a whole nother topic, but that's already got new science that's been coming out that the masks are not holding up. Recent study that I sent to all of you guys came out of what state was it? North Dakota. And very good data coming out of 2 neighboring schools, one masked optional, the other one was mandatory masks, and the mandatory mask school did no better. In fact, they did slightly worse, I think. A lot of different, and the CDC's study on masks, that was corrected by a group of researchers, including Tracy Hogue, who's a doctor over from UC Davis. That study was put together by University of Toronto, where they reassessed all of the CDC data, because the CDC had cherry-picked this data and pushed this study out just in time for the school year to start. And of course, it concluded, everybody needs to wear masks in school. And so this group of researchers looked at that study again, and they realized that the CDC had cherry-picked the data and took a narrow data set. So they expanded the data set, looked at all of the data, and found that when you looked at a larger set of data, it did not indicate that there was a benefit to masking. So there's just, really questionable issues with all of these areas. And treatment, Victoria mentioned this test to treat thing. I think the main thing they're giving out there is Paxlovid, and that's resulting in rebounds. We've all seen that with Fauci and many other people. So all of this, this misinformation mouse is kind of working here, and it's not really giving people the details. And again, the devil is always in the details. So onto this other document that I prepared for you tonight. Because I was looking at, the data on the website, I was just trying to figure out, I couldn't really understand, what it all meant, based on, and even after Victoria's presentation, it's not illuminated for me. How did our schools do? We don't have to speculate. It's not March 2020. We have a whole year, you've rolled out vaccines, you've got different schools, you've got case rates. How did we do? So I just started to go online and started looking at the high schools, and that's the first part of the top of page 1. And I went online with US News and World Report to get their enrollment numbers. I don't know if they're exactly accurate or not, but I couldn't find them anywhere on the websites. You guys have better data than me. So West Campus, for example, they said they had 829 enrolled students. The website, the SEOSD dashboard says 186 cases over the course of the school year, and it indicates their vaccine rate was 94.8%. So that's a 22% of their population got COVID. Now, I think the teacher numbers are thrown in there too, the staff, and so it's not exactly accurate. It sort of inflates the numbers, makes it look like there's more cases among the students than there were. But still, that's a pretty high case rate. For example, when you look at Luther Burbank, they only had a 43% vaccination rate, much lower than West Campus. But look at their case rate percentage, 21%, pretty much the same as West Campus. So I'm not sure if there's any data analysis going on here. You know, are we actually looking at our data? How are we actually doing? What kind of results are we getting? Rather than just going based on these Swiss cheese conceptual models that they threw out back in March 2020, and we're not really following up with data analysis as to what's actually happening at our schools here. You know, look at Luther Burbank or Hiram Johnson. They had a 55.9% vaccination rate. That's kind of lackluster. And their COVID case rate was only 15%. So, I mean, I don't know. The conclusions that I'm drawing from here is that the lower vaccination schools did not appear to have been predictably or consistently penalized with more infections compared to higher vaccination schools, suggesting maybe there's no connection. You can look through that data in more detail, and I'll submit it next meeting to the website so other people can access it as well. And when you go through all these other schools, the middle schools, the elementary schools, basically you can see through the numbers here that, you know, you've got a lot of higher vaccination schools and they got higher COVID rates. You got a lot of lower vaccination schools and they had lower COVID rates. What's going on? I don't know. I mean, I'm not intending this to be a peer-reviewed study. I'm clearly not a researcher. I'm not here to do that. This is a conversation starter. You know, do you guys look at this data? Is there any analysis going on? Because I think the community deserves it. Especially when there's targeted focus to certain groups and communities. You know, we're talking about equity, and I've heard discussion about how there needs to be more education with certain communities that they don't understand they need to get vaccinated. Really? You're going to go to Luther Burbank and Hiram Johnson and tell them that their 43% and 59% vaccination rates aren't good enough because their 15% case rates and 21% case rates are placing them at much more severe risk than anybody else? I don't know what we're basing that on. I don't know. I don't want to target people unnecessarily. I would like it to be based on data. So that's what I would like. I would like you to go back to the drawing board, and I'd like you to look at this data and figure out answers to some of these questions. Some more details. It's very confusing on the website. You're referring to people as vaccinated if they're partially vaccinated. I don't know why we're doing that, because the government doesn't do that. I mean, that's not how employers do it. So why are you guys making up a different definition of vaccinated? And it looks like you're trying to make it look like there's more people who are vaccinated than really are, because you're throwing in a lot of people that only got one injection or, you know, didn't get boosters or whatever. And so it kind of inflates the numbers there as to how many people are actually getting vaccinated. And the data for the cases can also be misleading. So there's elementary, you're just looking at the cases, and it looks like more elementary students had COVID, but really it's because there's more elementary students. So there's just a lot of confusing things here. I'd like you guys to go back to the drawing board and get some clarification and be more transparent with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
We have two more speakers. We have Manuel Jimenez and Taylor Kayada.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi, Letitia. I know we've emailed quite a bit, and with some other of you guys. I have to admit, I'm a little bit nervous. It's been an intense couple of years to be in the same room. I don't know if David Fisher is still here. I know all you guys are here. I don't approve of a lot of the decisions you guys have made. We went through 2 years of school being shut down, and then we had a strike. I mean, it was surreal. I think you all are good people, but your decision making, I don't know what to say. I'm here right now. My family, COVID is a risk. I appreciate you guys and what you guys have to say. Foremost, you guys are an educational institute. You're not a public health agency. You're not a welfare agency. You play in those spaces, but we need you to educate, and a lot of people go to school for their community. My family, we're not interested in continuing to have to wear masks. and to stay home at school. COVID, unfortunately, is here with humans forever, most likely, and we're going to have to find a way to get through it. And so, the decisions you guys are making, it seems a lot of people are leaving. We're not going to stay here for the next bunch of years if we're going to be told we have to wear a mask. I don't relate to people well with a mask. Some people seem to do okay. I don't believe that my son does. I'm not interested in being in a community and going to school and wearing a mask. I'm not interested in being in a community where you're acting like a public health agency. And I don't know. I wrote some notes. I don't know if there's really more to cover on it. I mean, I looked up last night. 3% of school districts are requiring masks. So you guys were last in the world, one of the last districts in the world to open school back up. You're in the 3 percentile now for requiring masks. I think we need to come to the middle ground with people and not be out on the fringe of extremity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kayada?
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for bringing this agenda item tonight. Thank Ms. Flores for her continued great presentations for us. Not 100% clear what the action you all are considering tonight is, but to the extent that we have a recommendation from staff to basically keep doing what we're doing, I think that's a good idea. I know I've been here last year, other people also asking for a little more, but I think at this point, we have something that's working. Let's kind of keep it going. And more importantly, let's keep these updates so that we can stay on top of this, both as a board and as a community to know what's going on. But again, thank you so much for keeping this going, and I hope we continue doing what we're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional public speaker, Mr. Heath?
That's all.
Okay. Member Villa's had her light on since the beginning of this presentation.
Beginning of this conversation, but I'll go ahead and pause and let Victoria continue. This is on another related matter.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay.
Do we have any additional board comment? All right. Ms. Flores, can you please just go over exactly what the recommendation is tonight?
Yeah, so tonight our recommendation is really about the face masking guidance because our shift in our testing and vaccine mandate is really written into the board resolution already. It allows us to have that flexibility, and I can point to that. I have it in my notes here if you'd like me to review that. Where it does say will be tested for COVID-19 on a regular routine basis based on public health recommendations for testing cadence, available staffing, and testing resources. And so that's why we were just providing you that update piece. The vote and what we brought to you back in June is really about that face masking recommendation and shifting from removing that 2-week waiting period to just looking at when the levels update on Thursday, we will make that pivot on Monday. That allows us time to communicate with our families and our staff which way we're moving.
Great, thank you. And I just want to agree with our last speaker. You're right. I'm not a scientist. I am not a doctor. And I've always said we need to follow the science. And we rely heavily on CDC, CDPH, and our very own Victoria Flores and her staff to give us the data that we need. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. Member Villa, did you? Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to take you off. Member Garcia.
Yeah, so thank you, Victoria, for the update. And, I look forward to these updates. I think it's important that we continue to communicate and inform with our parents and families, just so that they know what to expect, right? With plenty of time in advance, so they can make the decisions that need to be made. And I thank you for clarifying what's before us, because it was unclear to me. So I will ask you to please repeat it, because I'm not sure it's still crystal clear, and I just need to understand that. But before that, I do have a couple of questions. So I just wanted to understand that As a district, we are purchasing vaccines so that we can continue to send those home with our families.
Tests, you mean?
I'm sorry, at home,
No.
yes, thank you. At-home testing, the tests that we send with our kids. I know my girls get it, especially those long weekends. So as a district, we're going to continue to purchase those so that we can give those to our students.
So we no longer have to purchase them ourselves. We did that as that additional measure when it was really kind of difficult to have access to them. We are now able to order those through CDPH. We started to be able to order them through CDC. And so our hope is if supply chain holds, we can make one of those orders every month and send those at-home test kits home with our students and all of our staff every month. We have a major holiday almost every single month, except I believe maybe March, maybe I'm going to be wrong, except maybe I believe October. There might be one other month in there. And we just want to help, staff our families. Those of us that have had COVID, we know you can burn through those tests pretty quickly. We also want to help support our students and families and staff in accessing them through if they have health insurance or through the free resources through the government. So we won't be purchasing them ourselves, yet, because we can get them for free through CDPH for schools.
Thank you for that clarification. And then I do have a question about the filtration systems, the MERV 13 and all that. I know that the work has been ongoing. It's been a huge lift. There was a backlog in terms of supply, et cetera. So I just wanted to know what the status of that was. Have all those like MERV 13, has all of that been done at all school sites?
I'm looking back at Director Ralston, and I'm hoping.
I am getting questions about the status of that.
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over
Okay,
to
thank
our
you.
Director Chris Ralston to give you an update.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello. How is everybody?
Good.
MERV 13 filters are in the units that can take them. They've all been upgraded if it's possible. We're continuing to use the ESSER funding grant that we have to update and install on the units that cannot accept a MERV 13 filter. The spaces that do not have a MERV 13 filter do have the Aranci units, those HEPA filter units that are made for 1,500 square feet. Our classrooms are 900 square feet, so they're plenty big, one per classroom in those spaces. Principals do have the list of their rooms that may need that HEPA filter. That's going to be more at the elementary space. And if an elementary school has 25, 27 classrooms, most of those spaces, schools have 30 to 33 of those Aranci units, so we can also have them in the empty rooms. Those filters are on site, so as the red light comes on, it can be changed. We are changing our MERV 13s, all of our units, 3 to 4 times a year, depending on a 90-day cycle. We have that in contract through the end of the ESSER funding, which is 2024. So we are in well position to continue the filter replacement, providing great indoor air quality for our classrooms.
Okay, great, thank you. That's great information so that I can share out with some families who have asked. So
Sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Anytime.
And then my last question before you once again clarify the action before us. When can we expect the communication to our families as, we're getting ready to start the school year? So what's the timeline of communicating? This is where we're at. This is what, our county levels are. So this is what, we're asking families to, this is how we expect students to come back into the classroom. Mask, no mask, indoors, outdoors, all of that. I'm just interested in understanding when does that go out to parents?
Yeah, so we have updated our return to health plan already, and depending on what happens tonight, we've been working with the communications team to send that out, that initial communication. We know for some families, school beginning might still feel far away. So much like we've done last year is a series of communications. We've asked our site leaders, and we spent time and space with them today to start messaging, particularly about those at-home test kits being available as they reach out to their communities and plan those engagement events, whether it's an orientation or, a come pick up a school uniform or whatever. So we're hoping to start that soon, right, either, tomorrow or early next week, and then continue that. We've been messaging to our families that everyone does need to re-register for COVID testing. If you're already registered with Primary Health, you've probably gotten some text messages. We've started sending messaging home last week through Infinite Campus because we have a lot of new folks with us who aren't registered for Primary Health, and we want to reach everyone. We're doing that centrally, and then when our school starts, we'll shift that to our site. So lots of communication starting with them, and we will continue to do that.
Okay, so we're ongoing communication.
Correct.
So, good.
Yes.
And then once again, can you tell us what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so my understanding is that what was adopted by the board for our face masking kind of policy was to align with this low, medium as being recommended and high as being required, except that we would have to wait for 2 weeks before when we moved from high to medium, we would have to wait for 2 weeks in that medium zone before we made that shift. What we're recommending that the board adopt as a slight variation is we would not wait that 2 weeks. We would make that shift when the new level was determined on Thursday. The following Monday, we would make that shift, whether it was requiring face masking or maybe going back to a recommendation, whichever way we go. Just really being able to be more responsive to changing conditions. And, we understand there's strong feelings on both sides, but really, again, wanting to do everything we can to protect that school day and lower that spread risk in our school and workspaces.
Okay, so just so that the change happens more quickly, whether it's to remove or to mask.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Member Villa? Oh, it keeps on coming back on. Okay. All right. I don't see any other board comment. Can I get a motion for approval? All right. I have a motion and a second. Student preferential vote. Your very first one. Yeah. Either one. All right. Superintendent roll call.
Member Pritchett,
Aye.
Member Garcia,
Aye.
Member Villa,
Aye.
Member Wu, Member Phillip.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Before we get to 8.2, Superintendent, we need to go back.
Yes. Yes, thank you, President Pritchett. Let me first just apologize very deeply. I failed to announce that in closed session, we also, by a vote of 4-0 with board members Rhodes, Morowski, and Phillips absent, the board approved the appointment of Mr. Sam Floyd as principal of Leah Tata Floyd Elementary. Congratulations, Mr. Floyd. Again, just my deepest apologies. Congratulations.
All right. Item 8.2, MTSS high quality instruction presentation. It says various staff, so I'm assuming there's quite a few of you coming up. All right.
Good evening, Superintendent and board members. Thank you for inviting our team to share. Oh, we need to go all the way up to the top on the slides. I'm not sure what's happening with those. Does this work? It does work. Okay. My apologies. Just checking out the technology. Thank you for inviting our team to share our MTSS High Quality Instruction Strategic Plan with you this evening. I'm Erin Hansen, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and joining me this evening are Ed Eldridge, Director of Strategy and Continuous Improvement, April Shafto, Instructional Assistant Superintendent, and Garrett Kirkland, Principal of Hiram Johnson High School and our UPE President. Last spring, you'll remember that we shared an MTSS update with you all in which we highlighted that our existing systems of instruction and support are not meeting the needs of our students, and that in order to assure that every student has access to and thrives from the high quality instruction and support to which they are entitled, we must implement and support a robust district-wide multi-tiered system of supports. You'll remember that several of our site leaders presented their work, and we had a healthy conversation about barriers, opportunities, and threats to that work. We're back here this evening after a summer of strategic planning efforts and deep reflection on our system, and in collaboration with experts across the country and right here in our district to share with you how we intend to use improvement science and the strength and dedication of our educators to change our system to ensure it is actually designed to improve student outcomes. We'll also share with you how our efforts to prioritize and protect this work are dependent upon a district-wide coordinated effort across our governing bodies, central office departments, educator partnerships, school sites, and staff. Tonight, we will begin by considering how our historical and current student outcomes require that we change how we serve our students and families. We'll share with you our strategic problem of practice and how it is anchored in our MTSS framework and the conditions and supports we need to foster our collective accountability for this work. And then we look forward to having a discussion with you to hear your thoughts and answer any questions you might have. We are going to do our very best to describe all of the acronyms we use this evening, but we're also providing this slide just in case you need a quick refresher at any point. As we consider our student outcomes this evening and how they necessitate the re-evaluation of our programs and practices, we want you to keep in mind what we've learned about the database problem solving that anchors MTSS. Specifically, as stated by the Policy Analysis for California Education, at its foundation, an MTSS model provides students with high-quality, evidence-based instruction and supports in core content, behavior, and social-emotional learning known as Tier 1. Approximately 80% of students should be able to meet benchmark standards through that Tier 1 instruction and support. If fewer than 80% meet those established goals, Tier 1 approaches should be reconsidered and refined. Let's take a closer look at that last statement. When we talk about the 80% of students meeting established goals, we're referring to our big picture data and the day-to-day reality in our classrooms. That big picture, our 80% of our students meeting standard on our standardized assessments is critical, but more importantly, and what impacts each student's ability to meet those annual standards are the daily practices we see in our classrooms. So the questions that we want to ask then are 80% of our students thriving from trauma-informed and culturally responsive opportunities that make them feel comfortable and safe at school every day? And once they're in school and feeling safe, are 80% of them in every classroom with every teacher in each lesson or period able to meet that day's success criteria with our Tier 1 instructional practices? And further, we want to ask, are 80% of students in our least served student groups, our Black and Brown students, our emergent bilingual students, our students with disabilities, foster youth, and those experiencing homelessness able to meet that day's success criteria with our Tier 1 instructional practices? Without even looking at the data we're about to share with you, I'm sure you know the answer to those questions already. As a last reminder from the spring, before we consider some of our student outcome data, let's look at a visual representation of MTSS. Our Tier 1 universal high-quality instruction and supports should be designed for, at minimum, 80% of our students to access and benefit from. Every student, regardless of their level of need, receives these supports, which include academic, behavior, and social emotional instruction. When those supports aren't fully serving the students, we then, in addition to Tier 1, provide targeted supports matched to student needs in Tier 2. You can see in this graphic, our students receiving Tier 2 supports are two of the same students that are in the Tier 1 category. And once we've learned through assessments and data that we need to provide more intensive individualized support so a student can meet their goals and be successful, we then offer those Tier 3 supports. But you'll also see that the student in Tier 3 is also in Tier 2 and Tier 1 because the students never stop receiving those universal high-quality supports. The students aren't tiered, the supports are. So keep that in mind as Ed shares some of our recent data points.
Good evening. Standardized academic data, such as the one you're now looking at, does not tell the whole story, but it does represent our moral imperative and professional obligation to change how we serve our students. We know that what happens in our schools and our classrooms every day does not necessarily show up in our standardized data. But if our system was designed to meet the needs of all students every day, we would see that 80%. And so here we're looking at our standardized achievement data, and it lets us know that district-wide, 38% of our students were meeting academic standards in ELA and mathematics. Now, the goal, again, is 80%, and we don't see the 80% there. Neither do we see it at any of our student groups. Both of these data points indicate that we have more work to do with regard to implementing Tier 1 MTSS in English language arts. Similar to our ELA analysis, our review of SBAC math results indicates that our Tier 1 instruction and supports in this area also needs improvement, as 27% of our students district-wide exceeded or met standards. None of our student groups achieved, again, that 80% threshold in this subject area. So once again, it lets us know that we have more work to do in our implementation of Tier 1. As we look at our we've looked at our summative data. There are formative assessment data points. There are formative data points for us to look at as well. One of those data points is our chronic absenteeism. MTSS impacts formative data points such as this, and the 80% threshold is still applicable. Now, obviously, we don't want 80% of our students to be chronically absent, so what we're really looking at is we shouldn't have any more than 20% of our students chronically absent. When we look at our data for the 21-22 school year, we see that 40% of our student body missed 10% or more of the school year, of their school year, meaning that they were chronically absent. And finally, we are looking at now our suspension information. Suspension data is another formative data point that helps us identify how effective our MTSS implementation is. In this case, we are very much interested in our disproportionality. When we see that 4.6% of our students district-wide have been suspended, that's one data point. However, when we look to the right and see that 11.5% of our Black or African American students were suspended, that lets us know that we have a disproportionality in terms of our SEL and student behavior as part of our Tier 1 approach. Our final data point with regard to this formative assessment is to take a look at our MTSS approach through the lens of disproportionality of the number of student suspensions for our Black or African American students. In reviewing the number of students who received one or more suspensions during the 2021-22 school year, our analysis indicated that 32% of these students were Black or African American, though this population accounts for roughly 13% of our district's student population. As April Shafto comes to talk about our more about our MTSS efforts, these data points will reflect some of the points she's going to share.
Thank you, Ed. MTSS is the umbrella under which we serve the needs of each student. This umbrella creates interconnectedness between everything we do to support student learning. When we think about the whole student's needs, we are considering attendance, social emotional learning, behavior, academics, and everything we do to serve our students and families. For example, when our teachers welcome back students into the classroom using a trauma-informed lens, then students begin to feel valued in the classroom, which in turn directly impacts their academic achievement. MTSS will impact the data you were just presented by strengthening these connections between the ways in which we meet student needs. When we use both summative and formative data to inform our practice, and we're clear about what we need to do, why we need to do it, and how it will be done, then our Tier 1 high-quality instruction through MTSS directly impacts our system's ability to produce learning experiences that benefit all students and, more critically, improves the achievement of our most underserved children. Using an improvement science lens, we've come to understand that we cannot implement MTSS effectively doing what we've been doing. With this in mind, we have spent some time collectively working to identify the biggest threats to our ability to implement MTSS successfully and have developed a problem of practice. Through this work, we determined that it was imperative that we build a clear understanding of what high-quality Tier 1 instruction and supports look like, sound like, and feel like at each of our sites. We also understood that we needed to create the right pressure points, partnerships, collaboration, and coherence in order to develop this common understanding of Tier 1 high-quality instruction. This problem of practice requires an unprecedented level of interdependence amongst departments and teams, the inclusion of diverse voices and more perspectives than we've leveraged in the past. It will take an all-in approach to move this work forward. During the summer, several team members engaged in intensive strategic planning at the Public Education's Leadership Project, Carnegie Foundation, and in partnership with CCEE to develop the problem of practice. During the course of this planning, the team looked at CCEE's Systemic Instructional Review as a needs assessment. We looked at our system through our MTSS lens and asked ourselves, what's working and what isn't? We addressed our humanity, and we looked at the people who learn and serve at our schools through a trauma-informed lens and shifted our questioning. Instead of asking, what's wrong with our kids and adults, we asked, what happened to them and how can we address it? Finally, we identified root causes based on our locus of control, and we set aside the things we can't control and landed here: high-quality instruction and professional learning. With that, I'll turn it over to Principal Kirkland, who will share more about our problem of practice and theory of action.
Good evening. Okay, really this work has been a collaborative effort, and through this we have learned that we have a systems problem here and not a people problem. Oop, thank you. And we've designed our system to get the results it's getting. In order to get different results, we have to do something differently. So I'll bring your attention to our problem of practice, which says we have failed to define and implement a coherent professional learning model focused on high-quality Tier 1 instruction within a multi-tiered system of supports for all students, resulting in an unacceptably low achievement rate of 27% of students meeting standards in math and 38% in ELA, even lower among our most vulnerable students with significant racial disproportionality. So the intention here is that we define high-quality instruction and develop this professional learning model collaboratively, not with just the district, but our teachers and faculty on campus. And this process will demonstrate the expertise we have within the system, and it will allow educators to have inclusive voices in this process and increase their creation with us. This process will not only give us a high-quality instruction framework and a professional learning model, but it will also hopefully build collective efficacy on campuses as students and staff work together to define these structures. I do know that while I spent a week in the same room you were at, a couple of weeks later, your commitment to improving methods at the conferences. We spent time in the same spaces, and we understand the importance of the theory of action. We spent many nights working until midnight thinking about what it really was. And I'll bring your attention to the theory of action above or on the presentation. It says, if we develop and implement a district-wide strategic 3-year professional learning plan that defines high-quality Tier 1 instruction for Black and brown students within a multi-tiered system of supports and empower site leaders to engage staff in creating site-based, district-aligned instructional frameworks tied to the school plan for student achievement, then site leaders will have the support and capacity to implement and monitor effective Tier 1 instruction practices within our MTSS structure. So this is key because when you want to offer tiered supports, how do you know what to do until you've offered that first high-quality instruction? When we develop a common framework, common terminology, common practices within the campus, then we have that shared vision and ability to affect change. I know that we've worked with the district to define some tights and looses where we will have freedom and autonomy within those. And as I've talked to many of our principals, that those boundaries give us shape and form to explore the work on the sites to develop the high quality framework and the contribution to the professional learning plan. So thank you very much. And my time now goes back to Aaron.
I apologize. We thought we had 20 minutes, so we're about to wrap it up. So as April and Garrett shared, this has been a collaborative and thorough effort, and it will continue to be just that, with the aim of empowering both our leaders and our educators to lead our work around high-quality instruction in Sac City. This is a multi-year process, but what you see here is our year one strategy to first build our collective understanding of and our commitment to high-quality instruction, and then build the infrastructure needed to redesign our system to prioritize and change outcomes for our students. After sharing that problem of practice and theory of action and getting feedback, and with our initial strategic plan created, we began our work with our site leaders just this week by collecting their ideas and input on what high-quality Tier 1 instruction should look like in Sac City and what it does look like right now. With their input and throughout the fall, we will ultimately co-create our vision of Tier 1 high-quality instruction and supports, which site leaders will then engage in with their teachers to design how we are turning that theory of high-quality instruction into practice at each of our unique sites. The final measure of our success this year will be when each site aligns their SIPSA to this vision of high-quality instruction. Throughout our strategic planning work, including when we shared our problem of practice and theory of action with our cabinet just yesterday, we've asked this question again and again. With so many competing priorities and demands on our time and resources, how do we collectively prioritize and protect this work in service to our students? The answer we've landed on is that we need help from our board, our cabinet, our community, our staff, and educational partners to foster our collective accountability. We need system-wide clarity, supports, freedom to experiment, information, and resources all aligned and coordinated. We need this to be the main thing for our entire system. Every person, every role matters in our work to improve student outcomes, and that includes all of our classified, certificated, and management staff, our students, our families, our community partners, and you, our board members. We are really excited about this work, and we look forward to working with you and sharing updates in the coming months about how our system is supporting it by creating the conditions here. And before we wrap it up and hand it over to you to ask us some questions, I'd like to give a shout out to our advisory team, which is growing every day, but it currently consists of our assistant superintendents, Tuan Duong, Mary Hardin-Young, Dr. Sadie Hedegaard, April Shafto, and Chad Schweitzer. Our CNI directors and coordinators, Matt Coleman, Michaela Fetzer, Shannon Pella, and Danny Roletti. And our site leaders, Brandon Frink, Azarella Niguez, Garrett Kirkland, Sarah Sheline, and Jill Tom. Thank you very much.
All right. Do we have any public comment, Mr. Heat?
We do. We have two speakers, April Ibarra and Rich Vasquez.
Good evening again, and thank you for the presentation and information. I just have some concerns after hearing about this. I hear that they're looking at the data and trying to create the strategic plan. I don't understand why we're spending loads of money for stuff that we already know. All of this information, you can look at the California dashboard and get. You all are educated on that. Okay, so attendance habits, that starts in preschool, but we took away preschool. So how are we gonna help something that we disseminated, right? ELA and math, lower your class sizes. Look for more teachers. Get them the support staff, resource teachers that they need to get our kids where they need to be. We need school psychologists, social workers. You need to empower your parents. Bring them into conversations. Give them the tools that they need without telling them how to parent. Ask them what their needs are. Partner with them, and you will have better outcomes. I know because I've been there. I'm going to ask you as board members, look at your site councils and look at your ELACs. Are they updated? Do you have active parents and teachers on those councils? And are they properly being engaged in their meetings throughout the year? That's how you're going to make change. Not investing more money into new ideas and new problems. Programs. I'm not saying that what they're doing is bad, it's great. But I am hearing a presentation on yet another thing that we really don't need to invest more in. When we've been telling you year after year what we want as a community and as parents.
Vasquez?
And Rich Vasquez, daughter of Hiram Johnson, thank you for the opportunity. Again, it's funny, we always, again, been on all these, go to all these meetings and LCAPs, and again, I'm there, hundreds of meetings. Great plans. They always show us great plans. Keep showing me great plans. I'm like, yes, good, thank you. Again, I had a good plan too, huh? My kids are going to college. You know how hard it is still? My kid one is already enrolled in college, but it's still hard. Every day is still hard. So again, we got great plans, but what's the implementation? We're not, that's what we're struggling, right? Still seeing good plans, guiding principle, right? Same thing, still struggling that. Slide 8, universal high-quality instruction and supports in Tier 1. I mean, didn't I keep calling out all these vacancies? How are you supporting your kids and students at the most needed help schools, high priority, high all this? What are you doing? I mean, the stuff isn't changing. You need to change something in your system, right? Because people ain't flocking to those school sites, all right? I've been living it 4 years. I'm sorry. Chronic absenteeism, right on your slide 11, 40%. My goodness, woo! We ain't gonna be succeeding, right? I knew that's the main thing, right? 40% of the kids didn't go to school? 10%? That's crazy. Yeah, our data ain't gonna be right. I got problem of practice. At least you guys are calling it out. Thank you. Thank you for saying, hey, our plan ain't working. On the LCAP, again, go to the LCAP with a lot of good information. Mr. Ed Eldridge went in there my first year. I was like, he said this plan, but it takes 3 to 5 years, and then that's when you start seeing if it's successful. Well, what happened to this MTSS? It must have got blown up, because look, we're saying, oh, we got to start over. We got to do something different. It's all right. You guys are educated. You're making all the money. You're doing. Well, let's see some results. See some results. Slide 17, coherent, logical, and consistent. I thought the educated was logical and consistent, and they knew what they're doing. Again, as an uneducated person, sitting at home like, oh, I'm looking up to you guys. Now I realize we're all just people. I realize we're all just people. Again, all these things, admin, how many admin are leaving? Thank you, the admin at Hiram Johnson. Just stick it out one more year, please. Don't give up. So I could just have a mental, hey, it's all right. At least my admin gave a crap about us. All right, look at all these people leaving because you guys aren't giving them what they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments, Mr. Heap?
We do not have any more.
Okay. All right. I will open up for board comment. I just want to say thank you to the group that came in and presented. When I think of MTSS, I think of the community, right? You talked about every role. And when I think of that, I think of the teachers in the classrooms with our students. I think about the administrators that are leading the schools. I think about the people here at the district office that are creating programs such as sports, band, getting counseling service out to our schools, academics. I think of everything, the whole community. And it is really my hope and heavy on my heart that everybody within our system embraces this, because it is the only way that it's going to work. It will be the only way. And I agree with Ms. Ibarra. Parent engagement. This man right up front, Mr. Kirkland, he's one of the reasons why I sit on the school board. He engaged me. He set me straight and said, you know what, keep on volunteer. I still remember he said, I said, why do you ask me to do everything? He said, something in the matter of, a busy body, or, stays busy, or something like that. I still remember, or a body in motion stays in motion. That was the exact quote. And he was right, because I was an engaged parent. He saw that. He is the one that engages parents. And I know a lot of administrators within our district that do that very thing. But it is going to take parents. It's going to take our teachers in our classrooms. It's going to take the whole system to do what is right for our students. So I really want to just say I'm really excited. I don't know if you can see that with this mask on, but I'm really excited about this program. And I really think that Ms. Ibarra, please, I'm speaking at this moment. Thank you.
She can't understand what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for trying to engage her.
Thank you. All right. So I am really excited about this program right now. So, Member Villa.
I apologize if the translator left. I wasn't aware
Yes.
that that was something
I wasn't
that-
aware of that as
So
well.
now we know moving
Thank you for
forward.
translating,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Ibarra.
I appreciate that, because I didn't know that either. But I also want to say, similar to what you said, President Pritchett, the reason that I'm sitting on this board is because I also was an engaged parent. It does take a community. It does take parents to speak up and do something. It takes everybody in this room and beyond. But I want to say, everybody has told us over time that we are failing. We are a failing district. You come and tell us this every Thursday. I get the emails, I get the phone calls. It's I understand, I feel that frustration, but you've asked for it, and we're listening, and we're trying to give you something different. I promise you that. This isn't just the same. I know it's hard to change, but can we not fight a process that really has proven results that we see in other areas? This isn't something that we're just pulling out of a hat. It's a proven system that will change the dynamic and the trajectory of our students and our families and our community. Please give us the opportunity to prove this to you. We have people who are interested in this program, our students. We know this will work. Let's all work together. Again, I'm getting to the point where we can't keep fighting each other when all our end goal is to serve students and our families. What is the point that we're all sitting in this room, that you're still sitting here at 9:15 at night, if you're not caring about our students and our family? So I'm just going to say, give us some patience, give us some time. Again, we're all dedicated for results for students. Please, we need change, and this system, I know, will do it. So again, I'm the same way. I'm very passionate about trying to make things right and change this district, and I know you guys are doing that, so I appreciate you. I know it's very challenging, but I appreciate staff, everybody who continues to engage and work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Villa. Member Garcia.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that we're checking in on the interpreter, if she's coming back.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions on some of the slides, but I think for me, what this means is a whole child. This is really about supporting students in a very holistic way, whatever their needs are. That's whatever tier, right? That I like what you said, Aaron, students are not tiered, but the supports are. I think that's really important. But I do have some questions about, I'm looking at slides 9 and 10, 11, all the ones where not only the results from SBAC, both in ELA and math, we know that our students performed less well than in prior years because of the pandemic, the impacts of the pandemic, access to education, because of quarantines and everything, right? So those scores are lower. And then also chronic absenteeism that spiked because of quarantines. I mean, it's just been a mess, right? A lot of it out of our control, and this is happening all over the country, all over the state. But I am wondering is, despite these, very challenging 2 years for our students, do we see where there were some areas of growth? Maybe the deficits were not as great, but there were actually areas of growth, especially in some of our school sites, because I know some of our school sites are already working under this framework. So do we know if some of those school sites demonstrated growth or a lesser degree of deficit?
So we do have some school sites that demonstrated growth over the last year, despite the pandemic and the sub issues and staffing shortages and all of that. And, the data that we're getting is, freshly coming in right now. We're really trying to start to dig into that. And so I'll say that, based on what I've seen, there are some that are actively implementing an MTSS framework that did experience some growth last year. And then, there are others that have, attempted to do this work and have, really struggled for various reasons. And so, what we're proposing with our strategic plan is that we all really double down on the first tier high quality instruction for all of our students. And, as we build the multi-tier systems of support in each of our schools, we'll see, the matched interventions come into play, but really where we want to start right now is that first tier for every student in every classroom in every school.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear that there were some bright sort of spaces in our schools. One of the things, I think it's on slide 16, where you talked about the partners, the strategic planning. So Carnegie Foundation, PELP, and then CCEE. So I remember reading one of the more recent reports or evaluations, I don't know what it was, of the SIR report. And CCEE was lifting the work that is being done with MTSS. But one thing that stood out to me, and this is where I'm getting really nervous and concerned, is that that there was still no buy-in from the field.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's concerning because a lot of work is happening with all of you, but I'm trying to figure out, when does the field get tapped into? And maybe this, I don't know, maybe Garrett can talk to this, because I'm not understanding, when do they come into this planning process, collaboration process? Is MTSS just a framework, and then principals kind of take it to their school sites, and then it gets sort of tailored to their school site, and then that's when the teachers and all the educators at the school site and parents are part of that planning process, because it's now a very tailored program for that school. I think I'm not understanding, where do they fit in, because it's a critical component for buy-in and for success. And it's one of the things that stood out for me with the SIR report. And that's, then it's just words on paper, right? Because then it doesn't translate into action. It doesn't translate into students' needs being met, and then student success. So can you spend a little bit of time of what that looks like at the school site? Because maybe that's the piece that I'm missing and I'm not understanding.
Yeah. So I think our Principal Kirkland is the best person to answer that question, and we did, to your point, really grapple with that a lot as we were going through the strategic planning. So, anyway.
Yeah, so this goes back to the tights and the loose, right? The guardrails laid out by the district with which we can work in. So the goal is that we would work with each of our faculties, because we have specialty programs across the district, but I don't think there's a program that doesn't want to know, what should the students learn this period. So we're going to ground it in that. And then we work on the chronic attendance. But what happens is our department chairs have begun meeting already last couple of years, and we want to roll this out to every site so that the teachers and the principals and the site personnel co-create the definition for that site, right? We know there's around learning intention clarity. We know there's around knowing how will we know if the student is successful, and then what are we going to do about it? And so working on those Rolodexes, so to speak, the banks, that's what fills in the MTSS process. Many of these things are already happening at sites, all right? We're already working to provide high quality instruction. We're already trying to identify how we'll know if a student gets it. We already have chronic absentee teams. What this framework allows us to freedom to create site-specific things that benefit our students most, but it also holds us to looking at the data and making decisions based on data to progress through those tiers. So it's the collaborative work during the CT meetings or other meetings that we're holding with our faculties that allow us to not only define these, build out our frameworks, but also hopefully work together and build a collective agreement that we can get these things done for students. I know when we look at the data, it's big, and you think, how are we going to do something about that? What I believe, talking with our teachers, is when we reduce it down to this period or till the next recess, most teachers believe I can get kids to answer 2 or 3 questions at the end of this period. And so it's really a way where we work with them to define our strategies for student engagement, increasing rigor, providing data for teaching, right? And then we can do something about it. And when we break it down to a period by period or before the next recess, I believe it empowers teachers and students to see that I was successful right now. And in those micro efforts, we get to the macro. And while we build those Rolodexes of supports, definitions of high quality instruction, while we work together and do this in a co-creative model, we still start to build trust. We start to have successes, and we look for things that we can get some wins in, and then it continues to elevate our students. And then it creates the belief system that we can, and that empowers us to keep the cycle going. But it's the co-creation of these things with teachers and staff members, with the site administrators, that hopefully build this out and give us the collective efficacy to get it done.
I thank you for breaking it down like that, because that makes it just crystallizes for me like all the work that still needs to happen at the school site and how tailored it is for each school site, right? Because it just depends on their programs and their students, et cetera. So I just really want to hear back how that co-creation process is really rolling out and really, coming together. Because I just go back to that thing that stood out to me from that report, that this is all great, you're all heading in the right direction, but we still need that local buy-in. So it's just really important, and this is just really important work. And this foundation is just really, really critical for our students, especially now because their needs are so much greater. So I just wanted to leave it at that. But I really thank you for sharing like what that's going to look like. One last question. The role of the parents, because I know that a lot of this comes with you're relying on your experts in the classrooms, but how do parents fit into this whole conversation at the school site level?
Well, for us, Mr. Vasquez, he's been with me for years trying to get more and more parents, and we're still trying to work on that. I spoke with Ms. Zabarro before the meeting started about our, principal, coffee with the principal, or just meeting, being available. We've had some Zoom sessions, during this time when we were not able to meet in person, and we're still going to be working through that. But the long and the short of it is, we know that we want everyone's buy-in and everyone's contribution to this. We know this is a big lift, and it's going to take all of us in a collaborative effort. So creating those opportunities to define and contribute to those programs site by site is what we want to make available to them through a variety of efforts. And Zoom is a powerful one to use these days.
I'll add to that just a little bit in that as we work to define what high quality and instruction and supports look like, family engagement is part of our tier 1 high quality instruction and supports. That should be something that every student, every family receives and benefits from. And so when we say, I think it'll become more clear as we start designing what our high quality instruction framework, what our vision is of that, and you start to see what the chunks are. And so one of the things that we did with our site leaders this week was an exercise in thinking individually, what comes to mind when you think of high quality instruction and supports, and then having them work to reach consensus in smaller groups about what are the top 5 things that come to mind and what would you expect to see in high quality instruction. And then we had them all around the walls in here, and we did this gallery walk, and we saw that there were all these commonalities that came up. Standards-based instruction, using assessment to gather, to know how your students are doing. The 4 questions that Garrett talked about. What are they learning? How do we know if they're learning it? What are we doing if they are? What are we doing if they aren't? But the other pieces that also came out are this need for really impactful social emotional learning, culturally responsive teaching and learning strategies, anti-bias, anti-racist practices, family engagement. Like, those are all tier 1 high quality instruction. And so as we think about, okay, that's what we're defining at a district level, that those things all make up high quality instruction. And then our site leaders take it to their sites and they say, okay, well, at Hiram Johnson, what does it look like when what does family engagement look like from a tier 1 perspective at Hiram Johnson versus what does it look like at Caleb Greenwood, right? Like, those are 2 very different, ways of parent engagement, not just because of demographic, but of segment and all of that. And so the idea being that here's the tights of what it looks like, but then you use that to really define it at your site. So it would be what family engagement looks like would be really specific to that particular community. You're welcome.
Member Phillips?
Hi, y'all. I guess the way I'm looking at this is I'm the queen of plain English. So rolling out MTSS, there is no year 0. So there's nowhere that we're starting and improving, starting with that one student, moving all the way up. So it kind of worries me a little that perhaps there still might be some barriers to why we are going to have trouble rolling out MTSS. Like, we talk about assessments and we talk about data, and we don't have that. So what is it that's standing in the way of this? And because basically everything has something that's standing in the way. What I don't want is for this to be, a practice of exclusion or, practicing on our students, basically. To me, it just sounds like an interesting experiment that I feel will work for many students, but there still has to be focus on the other 2 areas, the 15 and the 5%. So I know we're going to work them together, but it feels like while we're still trying to roll this out, we might still be leaving students behind. What are we doing, or what is that's in the way from that happening? Something tells me, I keep hearing about MOUs. So apparently, if we don't have all the teacher staff online, what are we going to do if we don't have all the support that we need?
That's a really big question. I'll try to address pieces of it. So I would say, one of the things that we spent a lot of time on this summer was really thinking about what is in our locus of control and what can we control. And as we, sort of asked those why is it like that? What are we going to do about that? We really landed on this understanding that, the availability of teachers in our community and in our country is something that is outside of our control. What is in our control is what happens in our schools and in our classrooms every day and how we respond to that. And so really trying to think through what do those supports look like for children at every single campus? And so, what that's going to look like in the fall is, I can't predict that right now, but I will say that, our intention is to really be able to go into all of our classrooms and say, initially, are we prepared to be able to say what our students should be learning? Like, let's start really basic and go from there. And so that quality of instruction is something that is within our control, right? The pandemic and quarantines and all of that is outside of our control. So we're trying to really hone in on what we can control. As far as the tiers of instruction and supports are concerned, I'll say that we've talked about really focusing this year, like our collective efforts on tier 1. That doesn't mean that our sites are not continuing to provide those tier 2 and tier 3 supports. We just know that currently as a system, because we aren't meeting that threshold of 80% of our students benefiting from tier 1, that we have to look at that entire foundation, right? Because right now what happens is that we're looking at, when we say we have 27% of our students meeting standard in math, that kind of tricks your brain into thinking that the other percent of those students are tier 2 students, but they're not. And so we need to really be thinking about how are we meeting the needs of those students. It's not that only 27% of our students can benefit from our tier 1 instruction. And so we need to really think about, like, tier 2 isn't just when a student doesn't meet the standard right now based on what we're providing them, but that we need to shift that tier 1 to be more inclusive and universal for all students.
Okay. So maybe it's just me, but a lot of times we talk about all the students, and I know that tier 1 is everyone, but the other two, I almost see this pyramid upside down. And I see, your 1 to 5%, I think it's the way that it's drawn, and, I'm visual, but maybe it just shows not necessarily the type of importance on the students who are in tier 2 and tier 3. I'm really there's a little fear in me that what we have been doing has not been working. We're going to continue to do the things that are not working while we try to repair what we can. Personally, I'm not giving this a negative kick. I'm hesitant because the systems that we have been working with, not just at the school district, systems everywhere are designed a certain way. So you guys are going against the grain if we're going to make this work. And it should not just be our poor staff at the top. The buy-in is not what we need. We need to make sure that we have commitment as opposed to buy-in. Because we don't want to just drag folks along. We want to make sure that they are so much a part of this process that they are committed to the success.
Yeah, and so that has everything to do with why we've designed it the way we have, in terms of, not saying, well, here's our vision of high quality instruction, here's what it's going to look like at your site, this is what we expect to see, right? That we need to work with all of our educators and staff to really define that. I will say, I think one of the disconnects that you might be feeling right now is that when we talk about universal high quality instruction and supports, it doesn't mean that every kid is getting the same thing in every classroom. It means that we are looking at, so I'll give you an example with structured literacy. So we have schools that are providing, our ELSB schools are providing structured literacy supports using the SIPS program. A universal tier 1 support is that every student receives reading instruction at their level, where they are, so that they can experience success and grow. So in our sort of traditional thinking, we would be saying that any child who isn't on grade level would automatically go to a tier 2 intervention, and that they would get, some small group pull out of the classroom, whatever. What we're saying through this structured literacy, and that being a tier 1 universal support, is that every child at the school gets literacy instruction at their level, and so they're still getting instruction that's tailored to meet their needs. We're saying that every child gets it. And so it doesn't mean that it's not like a one size fits all thing in tier 1. It means that every student, we're providing access and ensuring benefit at tier 1. So are we creating learning opportunities that give students multiple entry points into that learning, regardless of their background, experience, are they students with disabilities? Are they learning English? Like, they still need to have access to that tier 1 instruction in different ways, so that we're not just bumping them into, okay, now you're going out into an intervention, small group, because we didn't actually create a learning opportunity that worked for you alongside your grade level peers in your school of residence.
Okay, thank you. All right, Superintendent?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure no other board member
No.
has comments. Okay. I just want to, first and foremost, just reiterate to the board and recognize the amount of work that has taken place among many, many staff members, and that will only grow because I asked our staff to just go to slide 18, and I would just ask the board to just take 30 seconds again to read that slide, because it answers a lot of the questions that I think I'm hearing from the board in the form of an actual theory of action, which I know the board was exposed to and has learned about. So if you can just take maybe 20 seconds to review that slide, because we did go through it very, very quickly. So as I think, for example, about Member Garcia's question, you see that in the third bullet, how it is that that's going to happen at site levels, how it's going to lend itself for the local context of each of our sites, how it is that we expect there to be what Principal Kirkland talks about as guardrails and tights, that we have failed in our problem of practice, as it states that our focus is on defining what high quality instruction in tier 1 looks like. And that the instructional frameworks that embed that high quality instruction, which by the way, is going to be evidenced in the SIPSA process, will respond to the local context, which means that we are providing opportunities for innovation, but within some tights, within some guardrails that give us the confidence, to Member Phillips's question, that all students will benefit from that high quality instruction. I just want to reiterate, board members and to our community, that to the extent that we have already started to communicate that this is a new program, we are going to have to come back together as a staff and make sure that we communicate differently. This is not a new program for the system. It is not something new to the system. We are simply focusing on ensuring that every single student has access to high quality instruction. And what we are saying is that we have to develop a more robust professional learning plan so that our site leaders can effectively and in an empowered way work with our school site staff to build an instructional framework evidenced in the school plans for student achievement that you vote on every June, that give them the support and the capacity to effectively monitor that tier 1 instruction is happening in every classroom and every period, as Principal Kirkland just mentioned. So we have a lot to think about and reflect on just based on the comments and questions from you as a board. because we cannot afford for this to be perceived as a new initiative. This has been called out by our LCAP PAC, which as appointees of yours and of mine represent the voices of our community. And in the LCAP plan, they said that they expect us to focus on implementing this type of work focused on high quality instruction. CCEE has called out the need for us to build instructional visions, instructional frameworks within a multi-tiered systems of supports framework. CDE has said that this is the way that we need to respond to the needs of students as well. So I just want to make sure that that no one interprets this as we are trying something, experimenting with something. This is simply a body of work that we are refining inside of our system and empowering our through professional development, through professional learning opportunities, which is what Erin Hansen has just mentioned. We've already started doing now, and I'm excited about this work. I'm excited about listening to Rose Ramos as our CBO in the next presentation, because we are going to need to stay focused on a multi-year effort, but we cannot afford for this to be perceived and treated as a new initiative in Sac City Unified. It simply is a more focused approach that ensures that our students have access to high quality instruction, and that we are calling out our most vulnerable students, our Black and Brown students, because that is how every other student that has not been served well, our Southeast Asian students, our long-term EL students, there are many students who are suffering because we have not defined and ensured that high quality instruction is taking place in every classroom in Sac City Unified.
Thank you, Superintendent. Member Phillips.
Thanks, Superintendent. So just to be clear, as a Black woman in this space, frequently things have been implemented that still haven't benefited certain groups. So, I mean, I'm not saying that y'all ain't doing what you're doing. I'm just saying that it's more than just supporting the implementation of this or the rebuilding of this. It's also, making sure that we are, focused on, when we were at the thing and it was like, maybe we should tear down the entire system and rebuild the whole thing. To me, it just sometimes feels like a Band-Aid. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in a constructive way. I personally have trouble trusting the educational system. And I'm not putting it on you guys to try and defend at all the educational system, but it's just very important to me that, we consider at some point maybe we might need to do a little tear down. Just a little.
And just, I want to just finish, board members. We are asking for your commitment as well for continued engagement in this body of work, demanding that we have learning sessions, demanding that when this team comes back to you, it's not high level, but it actually is producing evidence and data that those instructional frameworks are being worked on, that those instructional frameworks have information that you can view for each of our school sites, that we give you confidence that allows you to expect that in June of next year, there will be more evidence that the focus of this work is actually taking place at each of our 70+ schools. So we will come back with a proposed schedule of when our team is going to report back in the form of presentations to the board so that you are kept abreast of the advancements that we are making. We are no longer going to keep coming back just with updates on this work, but rather updates with evidence that this effort is penetrating into our system. So I just want to thank you for engaging in this presentation, for the wonderful questions you've asked, for taking more time than usual on student achievement, and hopefully a continued and renewed commitment that there's an expectation that you're going to be monitoring this work very closely.
Thank you, Superintendent, and I am looking forward to doing that work. I'm sure that all of my colleagues can agree with that. This is an informational item. I'm sure we will have many presentations, and I'm looking forward to hearing how, at this level, how it is penetrating and seeping into the ground level to our students. So thank you so much for all your hard work on this.
Thank you.
All right, item 8.3, student use of technology, board policy 6163.4. Mr. Lyons?
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Aguilar. I'm Bob Lyons, Chief Information Officer for the district. Tonight, I'm bringing to the board 3 technology-related board policy updates for first reading.
In a minute. Give it just a moment, Mr. Lyons.
Okay, here we are with board policy 4040. It's employee use of technology. This board policy was last updated in 2002, and obviously there's been a lot of change in technology, both the hardware and practices in the last 20 years. Our current policy only mentions electronic networks, email, and voicemail as far as technology goes. The California School Boards Association, also known as CSBA, last updated their recommended policy back in 2015, so we're using that as the base. This revision updates technology as a resource to support student learning and instructional programs, and it adds how technology can enhance staff performance, such as supporting teaching and learning, communication options for staff, and site and district operations, and information exchange via email, file sharing, and others. And updates include what is considered technology, such as the internet and Wi-Fi, which were not mentioned back in 2002. The current CSBA update included personal digital assistants, also known as PDAs, pagers, and MP3 players. So those have been deleted from the recommended from 2015. A provision was added to include outside contractors and partners to this school board policy to ensure that our network resources are used appropriately by all. So anybody who uses the network as part of a contract, or whether community members or people using our network, so they're being held to this. Okay, the next one is, I'm combining the student and staff because they're both use of technology. The next one is Board Policy 6163.4, student use of technology. It was last updated in 2018. But I'm just bringing this back just to update some of the technologies. This policy was last updated in 2015 by CSBA. It was adopted by the board in 2018. And at the same time, so both the student use and the staff use of technology were both updated in 2015 by CSBA. Minor updates have been added, which considered as technology. Chromebooks were not mentioned in 2015, so we added that. We added cloud-based resources, and just as we did with the staff policy, we deleted the pagers, MP3 players, and PDAs. So what we're trying to do is sync both policies together so that current practice and technology match for both staff and students. Okay, is there any questions on that?
Do we have any public comment? No public comment. Do we have any board comment? All right. No, this is an informational item. Oh, or I'm sorry, this is a first reading.
First reading.
So we'll be bringing this back.
Yes.
All right. Item 8.4, or hold on. Yeah, 8.4, use of technology, board policy 4040. This is actually not the correct one. It would be
There you go. Yeah.
this one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. So
Because you merged those two
because
together.
I-
Yeah, you
I
threw me
combined.
off on that one. All right, never mind.
Sorry about that. So this next one is release of directory information, and I'm bringing it forward because the authoritative database for student data is Infinite Campus, which falls under the technology department. So this update has to do with release of directory information. So this is information about students that's permitted to be released. This the last CSB update for this was in 2005, but our current policy was last updated in 2002. So this policy protects student information by limiting what can be released and who it can be released to. This update also includes policy and cross-reference updates. Now, for instance, next, if you go to a football game or basketball game and you see the students, the football players' weight and height, this is considered directory information.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Oh, I guess I wasn't paying attention here. Directory information can be released to schools and colleges, the military, public officials for award recognition, news media, and nonprofits. All, of course, all in the best interests of our students. This update also adds current references and cross-references. And of course, parents and guardians have the option to limit the release of information with their written request. Any question on this one?
Are there any public comment? No public comment. Any board comment? All right. Thank you. We'll be seeing you. Oh, Member Wu, you got to hit your light. Member Wu, go ahead.
If as far as if a parent doesn't want it released, well, it depends on the news story. So if it's something we can't control, but as far as the release goes, we just don't release that data. So if we get a request from the news media and we look it up to see if we have parent permission, or actually it's an opt-out. If they're opt-out, then that is not released. So.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. 9.0 Board Workshop Strategic Plan and Other Initiatives.
9.1, the 22-23 45-day revised budget update. Chief Ramos.
Good evening, President Pritchett, board members, members of the public. Tonight, we're presenting the 2023 45-day revised budget update. And presenting with me tonight is our new Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Jessica Steele. Next slide, please. Oh, am I controlling it? Sorry about that. Didn't see that. Okay, and this is our list of acronyms that you'll see throughout the presentation. Our agenda tonight is going to cover about 5 areas. Just a quick overview on the 45-day revise, what it means, the district adopted budget versus the state enacted, the changes between unrestricted and restricted, a multi-year projection update, and then our next steps. So the 45-day revise, what is that? What does that mean? That is driven by that ed code that's up there, and basically what it is, it's simply a disclosure to school districts that they should be disclosing to the public what budget changes that were included in the state enacted, that were included in the state enacted budget that impact the school district's budget. Those things that are pretty significant and we should share with the public. So that's what we're doing this evening. There is no action required. It's just simply disclosure and information. As you might recall, our 22-23 district adopted budget was adopted on June 23rd of this year, 22. At that time, the state budget was not final. There were some uncertainties with what was being proposed in the May revise, that's the proposed state budget regarding the COLA, the ADA relief, and then the one-time funds. And we discussed that at length at that presentation. Since then, of course, the state did enact its budget on June 30th, and there were changes to the COLA. There were additional funding for transportation. There was a block grant, or is a block grant, the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. Another one called the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant, and some funding for the ELOP, Expanded Learning Opportunity Program. And then there were some additional revenue sources, and we'll go over those briefly. Okay, so very high level overview. The budget in June versus the budget today. So at the June 23rd meeting, when you adopted the budget, we were projecting revenues of about $690 million. The new revenue that is a result of the state enacted budget ended up increasing our revenue to about $773 million, which is a change of about 83.4 more than we expected. Okay? So what does that difference due to, that 83.4? Well, it's going to look a little odd because you are going to see a negative there. There was a reduction in the unrestricted side of the budget, a net reduction of about $19.3 million, and we'll go into a little bit more detail to explain that. On the restricted side of the budget, there was an increase of $102.7 million. So you have a negative and a positive, put them together, and we get that change of 83.4. So 2 buckets here. It didn't translate very well. I don't know why the graph didn't come over, but anyway, this is supposed to represent restricted versus unrestricted. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, I'm supposed to, thank you. So the restricted, of course, is that pool of money with the lock on it, meaning that there's strings attached. It's supposed to be for an intended purpose only. Some examples are that you're familiar with include like Title I, the after-school program. ESSER was pretty restricted. That means that they were only for specific purposes, and that's the only way we could spend the money. The other pool of money with the lock open or off is the unrestricted pot. That has some flexibility. Now, that's not to say that that we can just spend it on anything, because we can't. There are some restrictions within our unrestricted, but it's a little bit more flexible in terms of that. A chunk of the money is not necessarily for one specific activity or one specific area, but the restrictions that you're going to find in the unrestricted side are things like your supplemental and concentration, some of your lottery money. And we'll go into a little bit of detail into the supplemental concentration a little further in this presentation. We'll give you an example of that. So again, just going over what made up that change of that negative 19.3 million in revenue on the unrestricted side. Well, it was two major areas. The first was our state revenue. We have like 4 major categories of revenue that we get on the unrestricted side. Unrestricted, we get state, federal, other, and then there's another category, I can't recall off the, local, and local, thank you, Jesse, the local grants. So the 2 categories that were impacted were state and then our LCFF. So on the state level, what happened was we saw a reduction, an overall reduction of $45.5 million from what we were expecting in the adopted budget, and we'll go into that in a second. But the 2 main drivers there, one was, you might recall that $49 million in one-time discretionary grant that we shared at the adopted budget that we said, now look, we're going to put it on the unrestricted side, but there's a risk that that may shift and look different once the state enacts its budget, and it might even shift to the restricted side. Because there were some discussions we knew down at the Capitol about how to treat that money. But at the time, districts were kind of given a little bit of flexibility, go ahead, just disclose that there's a risk with that. So that's one of them. And then the other piece of that is that we were awarded additional transportation money. It was about 3.3, and you'll see that in a little shortly. And then but the positive side on the $26.2 million is that we got an increase in our COLA, our LCFF COLA. So that went up to 12.84%. And then that ADA relief that we talked about, we also were awarded that. What that ADA relief means is that we were able to take a higher attendance rate, because we knew our attendance rate pretty much tanked because of COVID and all the absences. So we were kind of given a little bit of a pass. We were able to use a prior year one, which certainly did help. All right, let's see. And so this next slide, I know this is a little bit busy, this table, but this is to provide you with the detail of the specific categories that lead to that, that overall reduction and on the unrestricted side. So I'm just going to go over these because it's important for the public to know the different categories of funding. The first one was the LCFF COLA increase to the 12.84%. That, you're going to find what that difference is. It's located there pretty clearly in the difference column. It's 4 columns in. And for that first line item, that was an increase of $12.1 million. This is ongoing money. And again, this is due to the increase in COLA that ended up being in the enacted state budget. The second category is the ADA relief that I just talked about. Because we were able to use that higher attendance yield, we were able to recognize an additional $14 million. And again, this is also ongoing. And so the explanation for this is in the notes column. And the third one I just mentioned, that is the transportation add-on. Now, this is one of those unique unrestricted revenues that's also restricted, because this transportation one can only be spent, as stated here. First of all, we do have to have a board-approved plan. It's due by April 1st, 23. It's stated in that column. We have to describe how we are using these services for students with disabilities, low income, homeless, foster youth, English language learners, and this plan has to be updated annually. So basically, we have to earn it. If we don't spend it this way, then we don't get to earn it. So this is one of those odd ones. It's restricted within the unrestricted side of the budget. And then, of course, there was a little bit of an increase to unrestricted lottery, about $235,000. And then that bottom row there, that's that $49 million that I was talking about, that adopted budget. We thought it was going to end up on the unrestricted side, and it didn't. So we have it here that we are removing it from that part of the budget. So that was quite a big chunk there. And then on the expenditure changes, the only ones that you are seeing here are those that are tied to specific activities. We know that we are required to spend on our TK expansion programs. So what you're seeing here is the staffing that's associated with those additional programs. We set aside that money, and so we're just disclosing the number of teachers and the cost for the extra teachers and the benefits that are related to that. In addition, what we've also done is that we have reserved the extra supplemental and concentration funds that we've received until we have a plan for that for $5.1 million. Otherwise, if you don't, it's going to fall to the fund, it's going to fall into your reserve category and appear that it's available when really it's supposed to be spent on additional services for the students that generate these dollars. And those, again, would be that criteria that I mentioned earlier, your foster youth, your EL, free and reduced lunch, and a couple of other categories. And then your restricted lottery expenditures for $235,000. So for the expenditures, we saw a change of about 7.7. And okay, how much money is left? And I'm going to explain the left because, how much money is left, because that requires a little bit of an explanation. Now, this is assuming that we're not going to spend this money on, this is assuming that we would be operating completely at a surplus for our full 3 years. So we have to be really careful in the way we explain this slide, and I'll go into detail on that one. So let's start with that $29.6 million. This is the ongoing unrestricted side of the house, how much additional money we can count on every year. But as I stated earlier, not all of it is available to be spent any which way. 5.1 is specific to supplemental and concentration students, which are our high-need students. 3.3 is for that new transportation program I just talked about. That leaves you with really some flexibility to utilize $21.2 million on potentially new student investments or new activities. However, investing that $21.2 million at this point in time, just using these multi-year projections, every single year will definitely, reduce and deplete your surplus, assuming everything stays the same. So we just have to disclose that. And then if you continue to spend that 21 ongoing every single year through your third year, by the third year, then you'll start to get back into deficit spending, assuming we don't get any additional revenue. So, but we're not sure at this point, if that's going to turn around, but it's really important that we disclose that spending this 21.2 ongoing doesn't mean that we're going to maintain a surplus based on these projections at this time. Okay, and of course we'll share more information on the budget. There's a couple of unknowns right now. We have not yet closed the books, and so we still have to determine what our final ending fund balance is for our prior year. This next slide is, we just got to remind our public, of course, and the board that we have a lot of new money in the system that has been spent or allocated to some activities. And some of those pots were funded with, some of those activities were funded with our ESSER funds. Quite a lot of activity here. We allocated about $17 million for counselors, social workers, school psychologists. We set aside about $8.4 million out of ESSER 3 for a pool of staff. This way we could support our schools as needed. We would have that flexibility. And we pretty much have used a good amount of that. Last year, we also provided additional substitute support for our schools as they needed, and that we spent about $2 million on that. And then on our special education investments, we have allocated about $35 million out of ESSER 3 for those initiatives, and they are quickly filling positions and adding resources and programs to address their needs. And then we also set aside about 5% for additional support staff, which is almost close to $8 million. And then our last category is MTSS support. And so that is to be determined. You heard the presentation earlier, and so we still have to flesh that out and figure out what those investments will look like. So just some initiatives and some commitments to bring to your attention that are in the budget now and are at risk for their funding eventually running out, because these are funded with one-time dollars. And then at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse for the restricted side.
Thank you, Rose. Good evening, President Pritchett, members of the board, Superintendent Aguilar. As Rose shared earlier in the presentation, the budget is broken into two primary buckets, the first being unrestricted and the second being restricted. And so the next two slides highlight and go into a little more detail on the restricted side and the changes we've seen since adopted budget. In total, $102.7 million increase in our restricted funding. And there's two primary categories under this, and the first being one-time funds. We saw a $55.7 million increase related to the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant, which must be spent by 27-28. 28, and $21.9 million in one-time funds for the arts, music, and instructional materials grant, which must be spent by 25-26. And then lastly, we saw a $25 million increase in the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, which is an ongoing restricted funding source. This slide goes into a bit more detail on each of those funding sources and also highlights one other minor adjustment, and that was on the restricted lottery, which saw an increase of $65,000 since adopted budget. Looking at the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, as Rose mentioned, a lot of the restricted dollars have specific allowable uses. And so for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, this includes providing comprehensive before, after, and summer school opportunities for grades TK through 6. Looking at the arts, music, and instructional materials discretionary block grant, this does require a board-approved spending plan, and the funds may be used for professional development, instructional materials, code-related supplies, as well as operational costs and textbooks and instructional materials. Lastly, the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. This funding source does not require a board-approved spending plan, although it is recommended. These funds are to be used to provide pupil supports, additional academic services, instruction for credit-deficient students, as well as increasing learning time and closing learning gaps. This slide takes a look at our board commitments, and apologies for the double word board, but this takes a look at our board commitments. As you may recall from the June 23rd meeting, the board took action to commit funds for those initiatives on the left-hand side, as well as the corresponding dollar amounts. And since that time period, there have been additional district initiatives identified for future commitments. These include $1 million for reimagining safety, $250,000 for visual and performing arts, $35,000 for discretionary fund changes for board members, $500,000 for strategies for filling vacancies, as well as $150,000 for a marketing plan, and lastly, additional support services with a dollar amount to be determined. And these will be brought to a future board meeting for consideration of committing those funds. This next slide highlights another area of additional consideration, and that is the utilization of a classification compensation study to support recruitment, staff recruitment and retention in the following job classes, including our bus drivers, instructional aides, health aides, as well as special education aides. This slide summarizes a lot of the information shared earlier in the presentation. This shows how the unrestricted and restricted dollars combine for our total general fund budget, and those figures are represented in the rightmost column with our 45-day revised budget. And then the leftmost column is where we were at the adopted budget 45 days ago, and in the middle column represents the increase or decrease since the adopted budget. As you can see, total revenues increased by $83.4 million, and expenditures increased by $32.8 million, resulting in a net increase of $50.6 million within the fund balance and an ending fund balance of $160 million. However, in looking at the ending fund balance, it's very important to note that a lot of these dollars are already accounted for within our components of ending fund balance. So taking a look first at the restricted side, at the restricted line item, there's $90 million in restricted funds, as we shared earlier, that have very specific allowable uses. And that represents about 56% of the ending fund balance. There's also commitments. The board commitments identified a few slides ago that represent about $41.4 million in student-centered initiatives. And that represents an additional 26% of the ending fund balance. We also have $3.2 million in assignments, and of course our 2% required reserve for economic uncertainty of $13.6 million. Once these are factored in, it leaves an unassigned, unappropriated balance of $11.5 million. This next slide takes a look at our multi-year projections. The top table represents where we are today with the 45-day revised budget, and the bottom table represents the 2022-23 adopted budget. As you can see, a number of changes. Most notably, we see the deficit spend eliminated in the 2023-24 year, as well as in the 24-25 year, and does result in an increased fund balance in each of those years as well. But again, it's important to note the components of ending fund balance and those items that are within those that account for a portion of those ending fund balance dollars, and the resulting unassigned unappropriated amount of about $32.9 million in 2023-24 and $39.5 million in 24-25. It's also important to note that these figures don't include any potential future board commitments or student-centered initiatives that Rose described earlier in the presentation. This slide highlights the risk and opportunities. Some of these you've seen in prior presentations. They include on the risk side, uncertainty regarding ongoing state funding for K-12 districts, potential future impact of a recessionary economy, of course, enrollment and continuing to closely monitor enrollment, additional unfunded COVID-19 related expenses, and lastly, audit guidance on the utilization of the 2019-20 COVID-19 relief calculations, which were a part of our LCFF formula that Rose shared earlier in the presentation as well. Looking at our opportunities, there's opportunity for improved state budget and funding for K-12 districts, stable or increased enrollment, and lastly, the potential to make up instructional days lost during 21-22 through the state waiver process. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to CBO Rose Ramos. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And this takes us to our next step. I just wanted to share just something really quick on the previous slide about an opportunity on the enrollment side. I just wanted to share that so far, the district has been trending our enrollment above projections. And so it's a little bit of good news, and hopefully we'll, stay the course as school starts, and that'll continue to increase throughout the year. And we'll certainly keep the board posted on that positive change for the district. These are our next steps for finance, in terms of financial reporting. We're going to be monitoring enrollment very closely over the next few weeks through September until everything gets stabilized. And then also in September, officially, we will be bringing to you our year-end financial reports. And those are the reports that reveal how much, where we ended up in terms of last year, the 21-22 year, and they set the beginning balance for this new budget year. December, we bring our first interim report and the independent financial audit, and then in January, we share a budget update based on the governor's budget proposal for the coming year. And the next steps as far as the program plans, because you did see that quite a bit of funding there that's available, but some of it requires plans, formal plans to be approved by the board, the district will start planning for an implementation of that spending the fall of 2022. So we'll be returning to the board with recommendations for specific student-centered investments based on the information that you heard earlier today in the other presentation. And that pretty much concludes our presentation. So if there are any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
We do. Taylor Kayada has signed up.
Thank you. I have to say, I am very disappointed to see that this is an information-only item, and that once again, this board is not providing a direction to Ms. Ramos and her staff. Ending on these final two slides, we have 5 months are going to go by. There are going to be some breadcrumbs where this board gets to provide very little input on minor things that are basically state-required board input. Where is this board on providing real input to how this district should be run, what our budget priorities are, and what our values are? I'm not seeing it. I've been watching this for the past 5 years plus. The state auditor's report, reports before that, reports since then. We constantly see that our budget is not working, that we are not reflecting what our values are, and we end up in situations where we say, oh, we don't have the money. We don't know where the money went. We just kept, report after report after report. We have these unaudited actuals. We have the next ones. We have this. Where's the board? This is one of your primary obligations as a board, is to set the direction for where our budget is. Where our money is how we run as a district. MTSS and all that's great, but that's not the larger picture. This is one of the main reasons I'm running for school board, is because I don't see this board acting as it should be acting. Frankly, it's a dereliction of duty. I'd also like to say that at the last meeting that you all had, Trustee Phillips raised a concern about what is our actual position on reserves. How much money should we be putting aside? Trustee Wu, you had some good input, but it got shut down and it said we have to consider it again. It was not agendized. Why isn't it agendized today? Trustee Phillips isn't here. She doesn't need to be, because the concerns she brought up last time are once again being ignored. I really, as someone who has kids in this district, I want to see a board that's telling us what the priorities are. I have no problem with Ms. Ramos, with her staff. I know I've done audits of school districts. It's hard, right? But you need someone on the policy side telling you what to do and having clear direction. I'm not seeing it, and frankly, I deserve better. You all need to be doing more. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
We do not have any others.
All right, I will open this up for board comment. First, I just kind of want to reiterate, certainly good news about the enrollment. I'm really glad to hear about that. I know when I first joined the board 10 years ago, I think we had roughly 57,000 students. And I know at one point, like I heard 39,000 recently, right? And that's a huge decline. Since our last board meeting, the state budget for the fiscal year of 22-23 was finalized and finally signed into law, right? So now the final state budget increases funding for public education statewide and will provide more resources to our district than what was projected last June. From what you have shown to us, most of the additional funds are restricted for specific purposes, and some funds are limited term, right? While this is certainly great news, it is important for our community to understand that most of the additional funding is restricted and for specific purposes. I'll give you some examples. Some of the restricted funding is specifically earmarked for learning recovery programs to help students who fall behind during the pandemic shutdown, behind in the pandemic shutdown, arts and music instruction, and expanded learning through before and after school programs and summer programming. In addition, for the restricted funding for these important programs, our district will receive some additional unrestricted funds. We just heard from our team about our focus on a multi-year journey to implement a robust MTSS framework to better support the academic progress, social-emotional growth, and mental and physical health for all of our students, including students who may need intensive support. With these additional unrestricted funds, it is my hope that we will be able to make great strides in implementing a robust MTSS strategy. Our community has demanded this through the LPAC, which they adopted last June. I'm also requesting that staff come back with the more specific information about the expenditures that our board has already committed to making use of the one-time funds that we should now consider shifting to ongoing investments. Our board is not taking action tonight when we expect to have a deeper discussion based on staff and board recommendations. Following the traumatic past few years of learning impacted by the pandemic, our students need and deserve extra supports. We have already agreed to use some of the one-time funds to address some of the urgent student needs. Now we have the opportunity to consider how we can continue and expand these efforts to help all of our students and those who need additional support. I'm excited, for example, to hear from staff of how a comprehensive summer 2023 program could look with additional funding that we have received. At this time, we must proceed responsibly. We must not repeat the mistakes by committing the ongoing expenditures that we cannot afford once limited terms fund, once they run out. We've done this before. We've seen what happens. So thank you to Ms. Ramos and Jesse Castillo for all of your hard work and all of your team. I do have a few questions for you. First off, in regard to the busing, I was really excited when I saw the busing on there and when I had read it before, because it brought me back to, when we did school closures, and even prior to that, we cut busing dramatically within our district. And I still remember, when we did school closures, I went and walked our neighborhoods where we did not have buses. We were closing schools. I walked from one school to another, the routes that our district said that our kids would have to walk to see where these kids would be walking. And I was appalled by where they would be walking, right? So I'm wondering if, I don't know if you can answer this, or if you don't, I don't want to put you on the spot, you can come back, but I am curious of, like, in terms of the busing, will we be discussing this as a board, or will you guys be bringing to us again of showing, like, these are the services that were once lost, and this is where we will be implementing busing once again?
It is a required criteria of this grant that the board approve this plan. You have to approve the plan, it's April 20-something, 2023 of next year. So we have time, I mean, certainly we can bring it before, but that's the drop dead deadline that it is due to be approved by the board. So before then, we do need to share with you what that plan is. And that these funds are intended for a population that mirrors those same students that generate our UPP, our S&C funds, excuse me, our supplemental concentration funds, which would be our foster youth, EL, free and reduced lunch, et cetera. How we are expanding educational services by way of transportation for those population of students. So to answer your question, President Pritchett, I suppose if those routes that were eliminated were those students that could be a possibility.
Yeah, I know it won't look exactly the same because we're talking 10 years later, right? And things have changed within our district and there's more needs now. So I'm really interested to see where those busing and how much of that we can bring back. And then my second question is, can you tell me in terms of an increase for all staff, what like 1% would look like for all staff for an increase?
Yeah, I have. Do you have it? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse. I'll let you.
Sure, a 1% increase on our general fund is approximately 3.9 million.
3.9 million for 1%.
Correct, for all bargaining groups, for all staff.
For all staff, okay. All right, thank you so much. Member Villa?
You said a lot what I was going to say, but it's great to see that, again, folks are asking for it, student-centered. This is what we're doing. We're spending the money financially responsibly for student services. We just can't write checks without being responsible. This is the way that it has to be done. There's restricted and there's unrestricted, and we have to follow those guidelines. It'd be unrealistic and irresponsible to do anything different. And I do want to say, and you did mention this, we did say last month, these are some of the items that we really want to focus on. Safety, we want to focus on arts, we want to focus on a lot of things for our students. So again, I'm looking forward to those things coming back so we can vote and move forward. And I know that they have projections that we don't have to spend this for another few years, but we need to do the work now because our students have really lacked so much over the last couple of years. So I want to see those information and I want to vote on that and I want to get these services going.
Thank you, Member Villa. Member Garcia?
Yeah, well, I'm going to celebrate because we got a lot more money. So I think we need to take a moment to recognize that this is a very different budget than what I've been used to for, the last, 4 years or 3 years. But, and not only do we have a lot more money, but we actually have projections that end in surpluses. Mm-hmm. That's a new day. That's a day that I welcome, that I've been anxiously waiting for, and I know we got here through very difficult, tough decisions that we had to make along the way, but here we are with a lot more to invest. And one of the things that I do want to make sure is that we have spending plans for all of these funds. What I want to see is where the dollars are going by dollar amount and by service, whatever that is. And I also want to make sure that it's really clear for our community, for our parents, to know where these dollars are going. They know we're getting a bunch more money. So I really need to make sure that, that we are crystal clear about that expectation and that request. I also want for that to be communicated to our parents in a very digestible fashion. I don't know how we can communicate this in maybe like a visual, like an infographic or something, just like these are the top 10 investments that we're making with these additional funds. But I think it's really important for our families to know where these dollars are going because that's what they're going to see, right? I do also want to make sure that, let's see, I have a few points here. I'm going to make it quick because it's an info item, but just need to make sure that, that I touch on all these. The LCFF, the additional 5.1 million, That is going to somehow be updated with our LCAP, with our PAC, and when do we see how those additional $5 million are proposed to be spent through the LCAP? Because these are S&C dollars.
Yeah, I can answer part of that question. Yes, you are correct. They need to be folded back into the LCAP, and that plan has not, as far as I know, been designed yet. So what the when piece, soon.
Yeah, well, part of what we want to do, Member Garcia, one, of course, as you know, we have a vacancy in that position, so we're closing in on interviews and all of that stuff so that we can renew all of our work around the LCAP, so that we can come back with that spending plan that we have. So I'll let you continue and then I'll.
Okay, so maybe it's just offsetting some of the goals in the LCAP, but I think it's really important that every dollar coming in is attached to some expenditure that's easy to understand, easy to communicate, and it all balances out. And then I also think it's really important that what I'd like to see is that our school sites get dollars directly so that they can with, they have discretion on how to use those dollars based on the needs of their school sites, of their students. Some of those dollars will have to be budgeted in partnership with the school site council, right? That's made up of parents and teachers and classified staff at the school site. So for me, it's just really important that we send as much funds to schools because they need to be able to quickly address the needs of their students. So I think it's really important for us to also understand how much will be going to school sites. And they need to know how much is coming their way so that they can start planning. Thank you for reminding us of the investments that we've already made with ESSER dollars. ESSER dollars, I know they're one-time funds, they ran out, but we still have until maybe until 2024, so we have 2 more school years?
September 24, correct.
Okay, so we have 2 more school years, and that's, I think in education budgeting, that's like future. That's like a long time from now, so I want to really think about the funds that we have now and how we spend them now. And then I do have a question about the expanded learning opportunities that's ongoing, and that's restricted to TK to 6. It's $25 million ongoing.
Correct.
And there is, and we can use those for summer school.
Yes.
So there is on another slide, the summer school budgeted at $5 million. Is that K through 12?
I believe that was for the secondaries, and remember that was in our adopted budget before the enacted budget. And at that time, we were projecting that our ELOP was going to, the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant was going to come in maybe between 8 and 10 million. So the state enacted budget provided us an additional 15. That was a very nice surprise. But again, that's only for TK through 6. So we got to remember that the secondaries don't get to participate in spending of the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know that the $5 million are only for secondary, so it's the middle and high schools, and this pot of money can help roll out a robust program for the TK to 6, a summer school program. So just trying to separate those. I know this is, a may, not a shall, in terms of a spending plan relating to the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. I just want to be clear that I do want a spending plan for that. I don't want it to be optional. I think it's important to, again, have spending plans for all these dollars. Just a few more things. Super excited because, this is not what I'm used to. I can get used to this very quickly, though. Just the board commitments. There's a list here that you shared. I think I see some areas that are missing and maybe they're just not spelled out. So when they come back, if they can be spelled out or we can be shown where else they are. I thought at one point we were going to talk about parent participation program and how we were going to maybe fund that program as part of the early education. So I just want to put that on there. Mental health providers, I know that we've set aside ESSER dollars to hire more mental health providers, but I think that one of my requests was to, come back with just some information and as to how much it would be and how we can get to one mental health provider at every schools. I know some schools already have something and they'll have even additional resources through community schools and through other partnerships, but I'm really thinking about elementary schools and how they might benefit from one dedicated mental health provider. So I just want to make sure that we have something in the budget that helps reach that goal. And then something that board member Villa requested, the WOW, the WOW, I don't see it on here, so just trying to, those are the ones that come to the top of my head. So just trying to figure out where those requests went and how much of that we can plan for.
Yeah, I can respond on the WOW. The visual and performing arts allocation of $250,000. I believe that the idea was that it would be folded under there, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's just about not using the same terminology, but that's good to know.
Okay.
And I think that is it. So I'm just looking forward to spending plans and just making sure that we know where the dollars are going and that we're communicating that with our parents and the rest of our, educational system so that everybody knows where the dollars are going. And I think it's important to also, set aside funds for the next round of negotiations. We know that we're coming back with an additional conversation about additional compensation, so we just need to set those dollars aside for that purpose. I don't know what that amount is, but I think we know that there's going to be a certain percentage of additional compensation, so. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Super excited. It's a new day.
Definitely good to celebrate. Thank you, Member Garcia. All right, we're looking forward to having you back.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right. Before we move on, it is 10:40 and we are past our 10:30, so I'd like to motion that we extend the meeting to 11:30 p.m. All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right.
Member Pritchett, before we move on, I just wanted to just make sure before we move on slide 12, board members, I just wanted to make sure that this is an example of where we do owe you more information, more specific information, but I do want to highlight that as you wait for us to come back with more specific information around what's on slide 12, I just wanted to make sure that the board understood that these, as Member Garcia mentioned, these are investments that we already committed to last year using one-time funds, and it gives you a sense of what we have allocated for each of these areas. I didn't want to spend too much time, but these were very welcome investments. For example, many of our school sites where we during COVID and that Omicron phase where we actually created a pool of roving subs that we were deploying to schools. Just wanted to make sure that you knew that we spent $2 million of one-time funds on that. We also created a staff pool to support schools, just a pool of teachers, if you will, that we can also have access to at $8.4 million. As Member Garcia mentioned, they're one-time fund expenditures that we want to come back to the board and tell you these are the investments that we would like to move into ongoing expenditures, particularly last year's one-time expenditures that amounted to about $17 million. This is where we hired more social workers, where we hired more counselors, where we hired more school psychologists. And if you remember, we spoke very candidly about how we were violating the spirit of that resolution, that we wouldn't use one-time funds for staffing, and you directed me to come back and figure out a way of keeping those positions. We will come back after we've completed our position control and tell you this is how many positions we still haven't filled, but this is how many positions we have filled. And we will be making recommendations to you about which of those positions, maybe all of them, we would like to transfer into ongoing expenditures. Now, yes, we still have time to utilize one-time funds, but eventually we will run out of those, and I'd rather get direction from our board and have the board weigh in on the decision-making so that we can inform many of those staff members that they are no longer funded through one-time funds, but rather through ongoing unrestricted funds. So we know we owe a lot of that information to you. We're still conducting position control so that we can come back with you with specific information and recommendations, because again, we took your recommendations, but we funded it with one-time funds. And so we want to be able to come back and say, we want to transfer and convert those one-time fund expenditures using some of the ongoing unrestricted funds that we've now received.
Thank you, Superintendent. All right, item 9.2, approve the declaration in need for fully qualified educators for the 22-23 school year. Dr. Smith-Simmons and Sabrina Jaquez?
Yes.
All right, made sure I got that right. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, good evening, Board President Pritchett, Superintendent Aguilar, and board members. I'm Sabrina Jaquez, Credential Auditor. With me is Dr. Tiffany Smith-Simmons, Director 2 of Talent Management. I'm here this evening to present the Declaration of Need for the 2022-2023 school year for your approval. Title V of the Education Code requires school districts to submit an annual declaration of need for qualified educators during a regularly scheduled board meeting. It provides flexibility as needed in order to fill positions in identified areas when educators meet minimum qualifications to apply for permits through the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Here are the trends from the previous 4 school years, showing that we are making progress in being able to employ fully credentialed educators. And this slide demonstrates our comparisons to our neighboring school districts in regard to needing emergency permits. And in comparison, we're about average to below average to our neighboring school districts. Areas of need include English language authorizations, resource specialists, librarians, and some limited assignment permits in special education, a single subject and multiple subject. Some examples of high-need single subject areas are sciences, mathematics, and world language Spanish. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Tiffany Smith-Simmons.
Yes, good evening. As Sabrina just outlined, we do have a number of hard-to-fill positions, and this slide just demonstrates a summary of the things that we have done to address those needs. The first bullet speaks to our teacher residency programs. We have our 3rd cohort of teacher residents starting this year, and they are focused in math and science at our high schools. The second bullet is a new opportunity that we had this year where we worked with Sac State to give their teachers that are just beginning to think about a career in special education, an opportunity to do some observation hours during our summer programs. The third bullet speaks to our Work Together Wednesdays that we did in July that were very successful. Every Wednesday in the morning, we were outside near the enrollment center offering conditional substitute job offers to every classification that we have in our district. We had some, ultimately they may be bus drivers, but they start off as per diem bus attendants. We had clerical, we had some teacher substitutes, as well as instructional aides and children's center aides. The fourth bullet speaks to our ongoing collaborative efforts that we work with our university partners. Last November, Sac State, with all of the neighboring districts, hosted a substitute recruitment fair. That was the first Friday in November. It was very successful. We already have the second one planned. It's the last Friday in September. We are utilizing some of our ESSER funds in this fifth bullet to address what has been successful in the past with our classified transitioning to certificated employees. We partnered with Brandman, which is now UMass, and SCOE to offer those employees that are classified an opportunity to complete their undergrad degree and go into a teaching credentialing program. The last bullet speaks to our newest program, which is SCULP, where we have identified some teacher leaders in our district that are interested in taking on administrative positions. Tonight, you approved a couple of those in your in closed session. We're very excited about these teacher leaders moving into administrator positions. And so with that, staff recommends that you approve this agenda item.
Perfect. Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Do we have any board comment? Member Garcia?
Yeah, I have a clarifying question on the SCULP program. This is great. I've been bending the superintendent's ears for, I think, a couple of years now about making sure that we have these programs in place so that we can support and feed the interest of our employees who want to prepare for the next level, right? And as a way to, offer those professional growth opportunities, but also to retain. So if I heard you correctly, this is teacher to admin path?
Yes.
What about admin, like a VP who needs to clear their credentials? What opportunities are there for our principals?
Thank you for the question. We also plan to utilize some of our ESSER funds in our Effective Educator Block Grant to support those principals that need to clear their credential. That program will begin in March. We are working with SCOE to do that.
Excellent. And that's also SCULP?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
SCULP 2.0.
Okay, SCULP 2.0. Okay, good. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And with that, I will move at the appropriate time.
All right, and I just, before we take final vote, I just wanted to thank the entire HR team. I know that you guys have all been working very hard on the job fairs that you have been putting on, so I just wanted to personally thank each and every single one of you for all of your hard work. All right, we have a motion. Can I get a second? All right, student preferential vote. Aye. All right, the superintendent roll call. It doesn't say roll call in here, but I'm assuming we're roll calling it. Okay. It's just habits.
Member Villa?
Aye.
Member Pritchett?
Aye.
Member Garcia?
Aye.
Member Wu?
All right. Thank you. Item 9.3, approve the submission of credential waiver application to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Welcome back.
Yes. So I am here for the approval, the submission of a credential waiver application to the California Commission of Teacher Credentialing. So Education Code 44253.3 allows school districts to waive a portion of the requirement for for a certificated teacher in order to allow them time to complete their program. California Commission on Teacher Credentialing requires that every waiver request go through a public notice process at the local level and must be board approved in a public meeting prior to the submission of the employing agency to the CTC. Here are the trends for the last 5 years, showing some of the waivers that we've done and the progress that we've made here. So the waiver being requested for the following career and technical education teacher as they complete their clear credential requirements will include specially designed academic instruction delivered in English to English learners authorization. And that would be teacher Steven Steinberg. He's a CTE credential in arts, media, and entertainment at Sacramento New Technology High School. Waivers also being requested for the following ROTC teacher as they complete their clear credential requirements, which include specially designed academic instruction delivered in English to English learners. And that would be teacher Miguel Ortega, designated subjects, special subject in ROTC at John F. Kennedy High School. Specially designed academic instruction delivered in English to English learners are the areas being requested in the two waivers this evening. These waivers will enable the teachers the opportunity to complete their requirements set forth by the CTC and to remain in their positions while they continue to work with our students. Staff recommends approving this waiver request.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Hey, do we have any board comment? All right, with that, I'll take a motion. All right, can I have a motion and a second? Student preferential vote? All right, Superintendent, roll call.
Member Villa?
Aye.
Member Pritchett?
Aye.
Member Garcia?
Aye.
Member Wu?
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, item 10.0 communications, 10.1 employee organization reports. SCTA? SEIU? TCS? Teamsters? UPE? Item 10.2, District Advisory Committees. CSE. DLAC? LCAP Advisory Committee? Student Advisory Committee. Do you have anybody from? Okay. African American Advisory Board? All right. All right, item 10.3, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Pritchett, for the opportunity. I want to just join you, President Pritchett, in honoring Dr. Easter this afternoon at the beginning of our session, and just want to reiterate how saddened we all are here at Sac City Unified when we got together as a return professional development day with our principal. We also honored Dr. Easter, and I can't express how difficult it has been, particularly given the friendship that we established and the impact that her passing has had on the entire Golden Empire community, and they've expressed as much to me. I had the opportunity and privilege with Deputy Superintendent Allen to visit Dr. Easter a couple of months ago, and made a commitment that rather than stay a long period of time and not return, that I would make it a shorter visit, and we agreed that I would return more regularly, and I didn't have the opportunity to do that when Deputy Superintendent Allen contacted me a number of weeks ago on a Saturday morning to tell me about her passing. But certainly it is true that Dr. Easter's legacy will always be for us the passion that she had for serving students at Golden Empire, and I will always take with me deep in my heart the memories of visiting her and attending those wonderful pancake fundraisers and seeing the enthusiasm that she led her school with and the very deep relationships that she had with all of our staff at Golden Empire. I also do want to express and encourage all of our staff. As you may have read last week, we also received the news that one of our teachers, John Zhang at Rosa Parks, unfortunately lost his family home in a house fire. We have put out some information about that to support Mr. Zhang and his family. I was able to read the email that was sent by Principal Jones to the entire staff at Rosa Parks, and was able to just see how much Mr. Zhang gives to our Rosa Parks community. So we are sending positive thoughts his way. We won't see each other before the first day of school, and on more positive news, I do want to just congratulate and recognize all of our facilities maintenance and operations staff. When I drive through Power Inn on my way to work, I see all of the work that's happening at Alder Creek, for example, but it's happening across the entire district. The new hard court at Caleb Greenwood, the stadium work at Hiram Johnson, finally the improved pool and locker room at Burbank High School, which when I arrived over 5 years ago, I just, the memory cemented in my mind, just seeing it just always struck me as a huge inequity, seeing the age of the pool at Hiram Johnson and the locker room, and so it just brings a great deal of joy. And that's just another project that I'm really looking forward to seeing completed. And of course, I just mentioned Alder Creek, a new field and a hard court as well, a new gym floor at Albert Einstein, new roofing at JFK, new shade structures at many of our schools, and our continued focus on those refillable water filling stations as well, just among other things that are happening across the district. We typically like to bring and celebrate with pictures some of those completed projects, and we look forward to doing that when we come back in September for back-to-back meetings with our board. But I also want to recognize that so much of this work, or all of this work, is being driven by the equity index that we developed here at Sac City Unified, and I should say the award-winning equity index that we developed in Sac City Unified, because it just allows us to direct resources where they're needed the most. And certainly we need resources everywhere, but if we are true to our mission around equity, then it should be data-driven as well, and that's what that index allows us to do. I don't see him here, but of course I want to congratulate Mr. Nathaniel Browning. I did send information to the board, but just want to recognize him publicly for being selected by the Center for Green Schools at the U.S. Green Building Council to participate in a year-long fellowship program around sustainability. Nathaniel was one of only 5 individuals selected nationally for this fellowship, and so I just want to congratulate him for that. I do want to make sure, because we're not going to see each other, and I know that you're very committed to this transitional kindergarten and making sure that we continue to promote TK as a wonderful opportunity for our youngest scholars to prepare for kindergarten, developing those social skills, 9 hours of daily weekday care for children, particularly for working families in Sac City Unified, but really as a way to launch their public school careers in Sac City Unified and increase their kindergarten readiness rates when they get to kindergarten. I know that board members, Member Garcia, I think you've been very involved in promoting and marketing this. Let's continue to do that over the course of the next few weeks. Member Pritchett already commended HR for the amount of work that they've done, hosting and hiring, as you saw, many individuals at job fairs throughout the summer. And I also do want to just recognize as well that among the transitions that have occurred at Sac City Unified, Christine Beta transitioned, and we have a vacancy. We are leading a nationwide search for a new chief academic officer, but I thought that the presentation that you heard today really marks a legacy of her time with us. Christine was always committed to bringing to life a focus on high quality instruction through our UDL work that you know, and she spoke of always very excited about that. That's what brought her passion, and so we will continue to honor that legacy as you heard today from our team on our focus as a district on high quality instruction. Finally, I'll just say that of course, we hope that all of the families we serve throughout our district community have been enjoying summertime. It's almost ending, and we can't wait to see our students in just 3 weeks from today. School starts, just put it on our calendars, September 1st. And we look forward to welcoming Sac City Unified kids back into classrooms. So all excited about it. I look forward to seeing many of our board members at school sites as we usually do. So we'll see everybody soon. Thank you, President Pritchett.
Thank you, Superintendent. 10.4, President's Report. Due to the late hour, I will forego my President's Report this evening. 10.5, Student Members Report. Do you have a report for tonight?
I have no report.
Okay, thank you. All right, 10.6, Information Sharing by Board Members. Member Garcia.
I just want to take a moment and welcome our student board member, Liam.
Yes.
Welcome. I'm super excited. I'm very excited that you're here representing Hiram Johnson. It's long overdue that we have a student from Hiram on the school board. And I have to say that I've been admiring your attire. It's very beautiful, colorful, and I just want to let you know that I'm looking forward to working alongside you.
Welcome. All right. Not seeing any others. Item 11.0, consent agenda. Can I get a motion? All right, I have a motion and a second. Student preference. Oh, we have public comment? Sorry.
We have Taylor Kayada signed up.
Sorry, Mr. Kayada, come on up before we take vote.
And I could be too late there. I'm not asking you to pull this. I just wanted to put a little sunlight on one of these agreements you have in 11.1A with Lozano Smith for legal services. I'm a government attorney, and much like other organizations that aren't litigation focused, there's a need at times to contract out legal services for specific needs, for unique circumstances that don't come up. But what I'm seeing in the agenda for why we're proposing to spend $2 million or more for outside legal services is stuff that really should be in-house. This is stuff that is in our core competency, and it doesn't make sense to me that we're contracting it out. It's labor relations, it's special education. Both of these things are something that school attorneys should know how to do and should be handling. It's not really the cost that bothers me, it's more the incentive to drive up acrimony because it has billable hours. It also represents not necessarily building in-house an understanding of what our needs are. Certainly we do need outside counsel. I just think we should really reconsider if this is what we want to do, if we want to be spending so much money in these areas, and whether it's possible, in the future to bring more in-house. Get some attorneys that will specialize in labor who work for the district, and maybe we can get rid of some of this acrimony we have with our unions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I had a motion and a second. Student preferential vote.
Okay.
What I wrote right here.
Yes, on all open session items.
All right. All right, good job. All right, Superintendent roll call, roll call.
Member Villa?
Aye.
Member Pritchett?
Aye.
Member Garcia?
Aye.
Member Wu?
All right, item 12.0, future board meetings and dates. Our next board meeting will be September 8th and then September 15th. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. All right,
Student preferential vote.
Thank God, let me go home.
I love it. All right. All in favor, say aye. All right. Remember, Woo? I'm getting you home with an hour left of your birthday. Happy birthday. Good evening.